My name is Tamara, and I guess you could say I'm a widow. It's been a year since my husband passed away. It's a title I never thought I'd have, but life has a funny way of changing things when you least expect it. Travis and I were deeply in love, the kind of love you read about in romantic books. We met in college, where we were figuring out love and life together. Travis was amazing, a charming guy with a smile that could light up even the darkest day. We were that couple everyone secretly envied, and life was good. We thought we had all the time in the world. But let me tell you about Travis' background. He had a tough childhood. His dad passed away when he was just a little boy, leaving a hole in his heart that never quite healed. His mom, Carolina, was something else, and I mean that in the worst way. Instead of being there for Travis when he needed her, she was off chasing her own love stories. Travis was practically invisible to her. Carolina remarried a wealthy man named Frederic, who lived in a completely different world. She cut ties with Travis like he was nothing, focusing only on her new husband's money and the fancy life they had. Frederic bought her a house, cars, and many other things, and she acted like Travis was just a nuisance. It was heartbreaking to see Travis struggle with her indifference. When Travis proposed to me, our life was stable and secure. It seemed like the perfect time to share the news with his mom, hoping it might help heal their broken relationship. So we went to her fancy mansion, full of hope. But when we got there, she couldn't have cared less. It was like Travis was a stranger to her. She barely acknowledged us, let alone our big news. It was clear she didn't care about us at all. That visit was eye-opening. When we stood at her doorstep, her coldness was shocking. "Hey Mom, it's me. It's been a while," Travis said. "Oh, Travis, why are you here? And who is this?" Carolina replied. "This is Tamara, Mom, my fiancé. Nice to finally meet you, Carolina." "I've heard a lot about you," I said. "Fiancé, huh? You're engaged, and that's why you're bothering me?" Carolina asked. "Mom, we thought you'd want to know." "I've missed you," Travis said. "Missed me, Travis? It's been years." "I've moved on," Carolina replied coldly. "Mom, please just listen. We're getting married soon, and we'd love for you to be part of our lives. We live just half an hour away," Travis pleaded. "Rebuild what exactly, Travis? I'm busy. I have a new family and a new life. I don't need reminders of my past," she snapped. "We're not trying to remind you of anything, Carolina. We just thought you should know about our wedding plans," I added. "Wedding plans? How quaint. But I've got plans of my own, plans that don't involve you or Travis." "I'm sorry, kid," she said dismissively. "Mom, why are you doing this?" "We're your family," Travis said, his voice full of pain. "Travis, I don't have time for this. My husband Fred will be back soon. He's the one who matters now," Carolina said. Her words cut deep, rejecting her own son like that. How could a mother be so selfish? Travis was devastated, and I felt his pain. But life went on, and we got married. Our wedding day was magical, and as I walked down the aisle toward Travis, I knew I was making the right choice when I married Travis. We exchanged vows, promising to stick together no matter what. Our first year of marriage was filled with beautiful moments. We lived in a cozy little apartment that we rented while saving up for a house. It was just the two of us, so the apartment seemed perfect. Travis was the most loving and caring husband. He would surprise me with breakfast in bed, and every day felt special. We created little routines together, lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes and cuddles, and adventurous Saturday nights trying out new restaurants. Travis always remembered the little things, like how I liked my coffee and my favorite flower. We talked about our dreams, our future, and how we wanted to build a family together. Our first wedding anniversary was supposed to be a magical evening. I went all out with scented candles, flowers, everything. I was just waiting for Travis to come home from work so we could enjoy a fancy meal and toast to our love. But life had other plans. Instead of Travis, the phone rang, and it wasn't good news. It was the police. telling me that Travis had been in a car accident on his way home. All those romantic plans, all the effort I put into making the evening special, it all fell apart. The dinner sat there, growing cold, while I rushed to the hospital with my heart full of fear. I paced the hospital corridors, praying that Travis would be okay. But the doctors gave me the heartbreaking news. There was nothing they could do. They said he had a day or two left at most. It was a gut-wrenching moment. They told me I could go in and talk to him one last time. When I entered his room, I was overwhelmed with emotion. We held hands, tears streaming down our faces. It was all in God's hands now, and I clung to the hope that a miracle might save him. Tamara, I don't know if I'm going to make it, baby, Travis said, his voice weak. The doctors say it's touch and go. Travis, don't say that. You're going to pull through. You have to, I replied, trying to hold back my tears. Tamara, I love you so much. Whatever happens, just promise me that you'll be happy and that you'll find love again. I couldn't have had a better life. Thank you. Travis, please. There's something else, he said, his voice faint. I bought us a house. It was meant to be our anniversary gift. It's a really nice one, in a great neighborhood, right next to my mum's place. I held on to some hope, I guess. I thought maybe if I was close to her, she might let me be part of her life again. I'm sorry, I feel like a fool now. Oh, honey, don't be sorry. You tried. The house is yours now. You're the owner. Do whatever feels right. I understand if you don't want a daily reminder of my mom, so you can sell it or live there. It's up to you. Travis, you're not going anywhere, I said, clutching his hand tightly as tears streamed down my face. I knew I had to make the painful call to Carolina. After all, Travis was her son, and the doctors had made it clear that he didn't have much time left, maybe just a day or two. I dialed her number, dreading the conversation. Carolina, it's Tamara, Travis's wife. I need to talk to you about Travis. He's been in a terrible accident, and the doctors don't have good news. They say he may not have much time left. Oh really, that's so sad. I'm sorry for him. I can send you the hospital address, she replied, almost dismissively. You don't know what I've been through lately. Frederic and I got a divorce, she continued, as if that was the most important thing. I'm sorry to hear that, Carolina, but Travis is your son, and he's in critical condition, I said, trying to hold back my frustration. I told Carolina she should come visit Travis at the hospital. Her response, I have a therapist appointment, so I won't be able to make it. Carolina, he's your son. How can you be so cold? He needs his mother right now, I said, shocked. Look, Travis and I haven't had a good relationship for years. He chose his path, and I chose mine. I don't see why I should drop everything now just because he's in trouble. It's about his life. Don't you want to see your son one last time? I pleaded. I don't know. Like I said, I had a lot on my plate right now. My condolences, Samantha. I'll try to be there for the funeral. Carolina, it's Tamara. You don't want to regret not being there for him when he needs you the most. I've already given my answer. Goodbye, she said coldly. I couldn't believe how selfish she was. Travis was fighting for his life, and she didn't even care. A few days later, the unimaginable happened. Travis passed away. It was a gut-wrenching moment that left me numb and lost. Surprisingly, Travis had a will in place, and he entrusted me with making arrangements for his funeral. In his will, he left me some of his assets, which was both comforting and heartbreaking. Even more surprising, he left a decent amount of money to his mom, Carolina. As for the new house, it wasn't mentioned in the will, but the seller had already transferred it to my name, so it was mine completely. Dealing with Travis' death was incredibly difficult, and I couldn't handle the funeral arrangements and paperwork on my own. That's when I turned to my sister, Kelly. Without hesitation, she said she'd help me through it all. The day of the funeral finally came, and it was as gloomy as our moods. Friends, family, and everyone who knew Travis gathered to pay their respects. It was a tearful service, with people sharing stories about him. Amid all that sadness, I couldn't help but hope to see Carolina there. But she didn't show up. I couldn't let it ruin the day, though. Grief had already taken a strong hold on me. After the service, we headed to the reception. People shared stories, gave condolences, and there was food. The will reading was supposed to happen during this time, and I had honestly given up on the idea of Carolina showing up. I was trying not to break down when, lo and behold, Carolina strolled in. "Thanks for showing up so early," I said sarcastically. "You've got quite the alcohol scent about you." "Just a few drinks with a possible future flame," she replied casually. "Seriously, you missed your son's funeral service for that." "Oh, come on, sweetie. I needed something to soak up the booze. I felt a bit queasy after all that." "Carolina, I can't believe you. You couldn't be bothered to show up for Travis' funeral, and now you're here, drunk, for the will reading." "Honey, I don't do funerals. They're such a downer. But I'm here for the important stuff," she winked at me. I couldn't believe the nerve of this woman. Despite Carolina's outrageous behavior, it was time for the will reading, so I gathered everyone around. As the executor, I took a deep breath and began reading Travis' will. The room was filled with hushed anticipation, and Carolina seemed particularly eager. "Ladies and gentlemen, as the executor of Travis' will, I'm here to carry out his final wishes. Travis left behind some assets and his thoughts on how they should be distributed. Additionally, Travis allocated a separate account for his mother, Carolina. In it, he left a sum of $5,000. $5,000? That's all he left for me? Travis, my boy, you truly were a poor soul, a loser even in death," Carolina sneered. Everyone was shocked by her cruel comments. "Carolina, this is not the time or place for such remarks. Travis had his reasons for what he chose to leave behind," I said firmly. "Seriously? Was he even a lawyer or just pretending? I can't believe he didn't have any property or savings and only had that little bit stashed away. It's like he was good for nothing. Looks like the poor guy died from poverty." "You're clearly drunk, Carolina. You should leave," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Oh, you bet I should leave. He was a lousy excuse for a son, and I don't want anything to do with him," she said as she stormed out. As the hours went by, I couldn't shake the memory of that messed up day. Carolina's heartless act at Travis while reading still stung like a bad hangover. My sister Kelly came over, and we both vented our frustration and sorrow about Carolina, who had shown no decency for her own flesh and blood. Time moved on, and I started thinking about the house Travis had bought for us. The idea of living next door to Carolina was unbearable. I couldn't stomach the thought. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I got in touch with the real estate agent who had been dealing with Travis's house purchase. Luckily, Travis hadn't completed all the paperwork before he passed away, so with the agent's help, I finally took the keys to the house. It was a bittersweet moment, knowing this was supposed to be our new home, but it was also a painful reminder that Travis was gone. One day, I gathered the courage to visit the house. As I walked up the driveway, emotions hit me hard. It wasn't just a house. It was a mansion, much grander than I had expected. Next door, Carolina's house seemed tiny in comparison. I didn't expect to see such a huge, beautiful place. As I walked through the door of what was supposed to be our new home, I couldn't stop thinking about the life Travis and I could have built together. The pain was unbearable as I explored every corner of the house, haunted by memories of what could have been. I realized that I couldn't live there without Travis. Determined to sell the mansion, I stepped outside. That's when I heard a familiar voice. "What are you doing here?" "None of your business," I replied. "Oh my God, there was no house here some time ago. Don't tell me you're the buyer of this place. It would be the biggest joke on earth with that little money your fiancé left you. Can't you feel any sympathy for your own son, who talks like that?" "Sympathy for that loser. I should throw a party instead." "Carolina, can't you cut the insults? Travis is gone. Show a little bit of respect." "Respect? Travis was a fool, just like his father. You and he made quite a pair." Her words hit me hard, not just because they were harsh, but because she was his mom. Her cruel comments replayed in my head, making the pain worse. So I decided not to sell a house after all. I was going to move into the mansion, not just to show off or compete with Carolina, but because I needed a fresh start. Maybe this was what Tragus wanted, so I decided to do it for both of us. Packing up my stuff from our old apartment was tough. Everything had a memory attached to it, a piece of Travis. I wrapped up his photos, his favorite books, and all the little things we had collected over the years. When I stepped into the new house, it felt like a dream Travis was supposed to be a part of. The day I settled into the new house, I knew what I had to do. I baked a batch of Travis's favorite blueberry muffins, put on a nice sundress, and headed next door to face Carolina. I wanted to give her the news myself. She opened the door. "Tamara, what on earth are you doing here? What is this?" "Hi, neighbor. I just moved in, and I thought I'd bring over some muffins I baked." "What? How? When? Why?" "Let me break it down for you, Carolina. Travis bought this house for us as an anniversary gift. He probably used his savings." "Travis did that. Why didn't I know about it?" "Because, Carolina, you were too busy with your new husband and counting his money." "Tamara, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. You've always been absent, from not visiting Tragus in the hospital during his last moments to skipping his funeral service and just showing up for the will reading. I made some mistakes. Carolina, you've been cruel and disgusting. You ridiculed Travis when you found out he left you very little in his will. You didn't even give him the respect he deserved. I never realized how much I hurt him until it was too late. Please, Tamara, I'm genuinely sorry. Sorry now that you found out your son had some money left for you. Love should have been unconditional. You know what, Carolina? Enjoy the rest of your life seeing my face every day as a constant reminder of what you did to your son. It's been a whole year since Travis passed away. They say time can heal wounds, but that doesn't mean the scars disappear. I'm learning to carry on, step by step. Carolina, on the other hand, is spiraling down a different path. It's hard not to notice her from my home right next to hers. She's been using alcohol as a crutch, drowning her sorrows, or maybe her guilt, who knows. Every time we run into each other, she has a look of guilt, shame, and regret on her face, and I can't help but feel a bit of sympathy for her at times. She missed out on so much when Travis was alive, and her absence during his darkest moments, even at his funeral, is something I can't forget or forgive. One thing I've learned through all of this is that being a bad person doesn't get you very far. Sure, you might gain some material things, but you lose something much more valuable, yourself. People who are dishonest, cruel, or selfish might seem like they're winning in the short term, but in the grand scheme of things, they don't last long. It's the ones who show love, compassion, and kindness who leave a lasting legacy. So my advice to anyone reading this is simple: be a good person. It might not always be easy, but it's worth it in the end.
Hi, I'm Michael Foster, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the biggest betrayals lead to the sweetest victories. You see, in business, just like in family, the person you trust the most can be the one plotting your downfall. But they often forget to check what's really beneath their feet before they push you off the cliff. Let me take you back to where it all began. Foster Technologies wasn't always the $100 million company it is today. 15 years ago, it was just a struggling consulting firm my father had built from scratch. Dad was brilliant with technology but terrible with business. By 2010, we were 3 months away from bankruptcy, and my father's health was failing under the stress. I was 25, fresh out of business school, while my older brother James was 30 and already a familiar face in the local nightlife scene. Dad had always favored James, the charming firstborn who could talk his way out of anything. But charm doesn't pay the bills, and James's party lifestyle had already cost the company several major clients. I still remember that rainy Tuesday when I found Dad slumped over his desk, tears in his eyes, looking at our latest financial reports. "It's over, Michael," he whispered, his voice broken. everything I built. I'm going to lose it all. Something in me snapped that day. I couldn't watch my father's dream die, even if he'd always seen me as second best. While James was out spending company money at exclusive clubs, I started working 18-hour days. I learned every aspect of the business, met with every client, reviewed every contract. Mom worried about me. "Michael, you need to rest," she'd say, bringing dinner to my office at midnight. "You can't save the company by yourself." But that's exactly what I did. The first year was brutal. I restructured our debt, cut unnecessary expenses, including James' entertainment budget, and personally visited every major client we'd lost. Many slammed their doors in my face, but I kept coming back. Persistence pays off. By the end of that year, we were breaking even. James found it hilarious. "Look at little Mikey playing businessman," he'd mock whenever he bothered to show up at the office. "Dad's still going to put me in charge, I'm the oldest." I ignored him and focused on work. Over the next 5 years, I transformed Foster Technologies from a simple IT consulting firm into a full-service digital transformation company. We developed proprietary software solutions, expanded into cloud services, and built a reputation for excellence in the industry. The company grew exponentially. From $2 million in revenue, we hit $10 million, then $50 million, and finally crossed the $100 million mark last year. Our staff grew from 20 to over 500. We opened offices in 3 countries. Dad's health improved as the company flourished, but his favoritism didn't change. Every success was somehow attributed to James's leadership, even though he spent most of his time planning his next vacation. In family dinners, Dad would praise James' business acumen while I sat quietly going through quarterly reports on my phone. I didn't care about the credit. I cared about the company, our employees, and the legacy we were building. Besides, I had my own plans. What nobody knew, not even my father, was that I'd been carefully documenting everything over the years. Every decision James sabotaged, every client he lost, every dollar he wasted. More importantly, I've been quietly building relationships with our key clients, making myself indispensable to their operations. I also had another secret, one that would turn out to be crucial. During the company's darkest days, when we were nearly bankrupt, I used my own savings and taken out personal loans to keep us afloat. In exchange, I'd received shares. Lots of shares. The paperwork was buried in mountains of corporate documentation. But I legally owned 40% of Foster Technologies. Or at least I thought that would be enough to protect me. I couldn't have been more wrong. Last month, everything changed. Dad announced his retirement and everyone expected him to name me as his successor. After all, I've been effectively running the company for years. Even James had been showing up to work more often, probably sensing the change coming. The shareholders' meeting was set for Friday afternoon. All major stakeholders were present, including our board members and key investors. I prepared a comprehensive presentation about our growth strategy for the next 5 years. Dad stood up to make his announcement. I noticed James smirking in his seat, but I didn't think much of it at the time. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dad began, "as you know, I'm retiring as CEO of Foster Technologies. This company has been my life's work, and choosing my successor was not an easy decision." He paused, looking around the room. "But there's only one person who truly embodies the leadership qualities needed to take Foster Technologies to the next level. Someone who understands our family values and has the vision to lead us into the future." I sat straighter in my chair, ready to accept the responsibility I'd been preparing for all these years. My son, James Foster, will be taking over as CEO effective immediately. The room went silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. But Dad wasn't finished. Furthermore, James has brought to my attention some concerning irregularities in our recent operations. It seems that certain individuals have been making unauthorized decisions and potentially compromising our company's integrity. James stood up, holding a folder. "I'm afraid my brother Michael has been operating outside his authority, making promises to clients we can't keep, and potentially engaging in unethical practices." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Every accusation was a twisted version of the truth. The very decisions that had saved and grown the company were being presented as reckless and unauthorized. Therefore, Dad continued, "As my final act as CEO, I'm terminating Michael's employment with Foster Technologies, effective immediately." The security guards were already approaching my chair. James's voice dripped with fake sympathy. "I'm sorry it had to end this way, little brother. But hey, maybe now you can get a life outside the office." The room erupted in whispers as I was escorted out, my key card deactivated, my access revoked. I could see the pity in some faces, the schadenfreude in others. But they had no idea what was coming. Because while James was plotting my downfall, he'd forgotten three crucial things. First, those unauthorized decisions were all properly documented and approved. Second, my 40% ownership stake wasn't as buried as they thought. And third, well, let's just say that when you spend 10 years building a company's technology infrastructure, you learn where all the bodies are buried, sometimes literally. As I walked to my car that evening, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message to an old friend at the SEC. Then I went home and waited. Monday morning was going to be very, very interesting. Monday morning arrived with a thunderstorm, fitting weather for what was about to unfold. I sat in my home office, watching the clock tick towards 9 a.m. when James would be strutting into his new CEO office for the first time. The weekend had been interesting. Mom had called 17 times, leaving tearful voicemails about family unity. Dad hadn't called at all. James had been too busy celebrating at his favorite clubs. The photos were all over social media, including some questionable ones with the company credit card clearly visible on the table. I smiled, remembering how James always thought technology was beneath him. "That's geek stuff," he'd say, refusing to learn even basic cybersecurity protocols. Well, that arrogance was about to cost him dearly. At exactly 9:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, my loyal executive assistant who James hadn't bothered to fire. Probably because he thought she just brought coffee. "It's starting," her message read. I opened my laptop and connected to Foster Technologies' internal security feed. Yes, I still had access. When you build a system from the ground up, you always leave yourself a back door. The camera in the CEO's office showed James walking in, coffee in hand, ready to begin his reign. He sat in a leather chair, my chair, and pressed the power button on his computer. That's when the show began. Instead of the Windows login screen, a video started playing. It was security footage from 3 years ago, showing James in this very office, making a deal with our biggest competitor to sell them our client data. The audio was crystal clear. "Of course I can get you their information," James's voice rang out. "My idiot brother does all the work anyway. Just make sure the payment goes to my Cayman account." James frantically tried to turn off the monitor, but nothing worked. The video kept playing on every screen in his office, but that was just the beginning. His phone buzzed. The SEC had received an anonymous tip about insider trading, complete with documented evidence of James' illegal activities over the past decade. His private email started pinging with notifications. Somehow, all his confidential communications had been leaked to the board members. Down in the lobby, federal agents were walking through the front door. I watched through the security feed as James's face turned from confusion to panic. He tried calling Dad, but Dad's phone was busy, probably because he was getting his own set of revelations about his beloved firstborn's activities. At 9:30 a.m., Sarah walked into James' office. "Mr. Foster," she said calmly, "the board members are requesting an emergency meeting. Also, there are some federal agents here to see you." James started sweating. "Tell them I'm busy. Cancel everything, and get it up here to fix these damn computers." Sarah smiled politely. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. You see, the entire department just resigned. They sent a company-wide email explaining why. Something about loyalty to the person who actually built this company." "What? They can't do that. We have contracts." Actually, Sarah placed a folder on his desk. "They can. Their contracts were with a subsidiary company that holds all their intellectual property rights. A company that, as of this morning, is no longer affiliated with Foster Technologies." James's hands shook as he opened the folder. Inside was a simple document showing the ownership structure of Foster Innovation Labs, the subsidiary I'd quietly created years ago. The company that actually owned all our patents, software, and client contracts. And I owned 100% of it. But the clients," James stammered, "have already been informed of the change in management. Most have already signed new contracts, directly with Foster Innovation Labs. It seems they prefer working with the person who actually handled their accounts all these years. The color drained from James's face as he finally understood. Every piece of technology that made Foster Technologies valuable, every client relationship that kept it profitable, every key employee who made it run, they were all loyal to me. He'd stolen an empty shell. The office door opened again. 2 FBI agents walked in, followed by Mr. Patterson, our chief legal counsel. "James Foster," one agent said, "we need to ask you some questions about certain financial transactions." "You can't do this," James shouted, looking wildly around the room. "I'm the CEO. I'm in charge here." Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "Actually, about that," he pulled out another document. "The board just concluded an emergency meeting. Given the circumstances, they voted to remove you as CEO, effective immediately." "They can't do that. You own shares in Foster Technologies," Mr. Patterson corrected. "A company that, as of 9 o'clock this morning, has no intellectual property, no major clients, and no core development team. I believe the stock price reflects that reality." James lunged for his computer, probably to check the stock ticker. But of course, his screen was still playing videos of his various illegal activities over the years. As James was escorted out of the building by federal agents, his designer suit wrinkled and his face ashen, I sent one final company-wide email from my remote access. "To all remaining Foster Technologies employees, you have a choice. Stay with a sinking ship or join us at Foster Innovation Labs, where innovation and integrity actually mean something. Your jobs are secure, your benefits will be better, and most importantly, your hard work will be respected." Within an hour, 90% of the staff had accepted the offer. But my revenge wasn't complete yet. There was still the matter of dear old Dad's retirement fund. The fallout was spectacular. Within 24 hours, Foster Technologies stock had plummeted 70%. News of James' arrest made headlines in every major business publication. Tech CEO arrested on multiple fraud charges. Foster Technologies in freefall as scandal erupts. But I wasn't done yet. 3 days after James's arrest, I sat in my new office at Foster Innovation Labs headquarters, a modern building I secretly purchased 6 months ago. Sarah walked in with a familiar face. Dad's financial advisor, Mr. Goldman. "He's been calling nonstop," Mr. Goldman said, looking uncomfortable. "Ever since he realized that his retirement fund is worthless, I finished for him, because he invested everything in Foster Technologies stock." Dad had always bragged about having skin in the game, keeping his entire retirement portfolio in company shares. It was poor financial planning, but he'd never listened to advice about diversification. Now those shares were worth pennies on the dollar. "Your father is desperate," Mr. Goldman continued. "Mrs. Foster, your mother, she's worried they might lose the house." I leaned back in my chair, thinking about all the times Dad had dismissed my warnings about James's behavior. All the times he'd attributed my success to luck rather than hard work. "Set up a meeting," I finally said. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., here." The next morning, my parents arrived at Foster Innovation Labs. Mom looked like she'd been crying. Dad looked like he aged 10 years in a week. They sat across from me in the visitor chairs, the same model as the ones Dad used to make me sit in while he lectured me about real leadership. "Son," Dad began, his voice shaking, "I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I interrupted quietly. "You let James destroy evidence of his crimes. You helped him embezzle company funds. You were complicit in fraud that hurt our employees, our clients, and our shareholders." "I didn't know." He tried to protest. "You knew. I cut him off. You just didn't care. Because James was your golden boy, and I was just the backup plan." Mom started crying softly. I handed her a tissue. "But that's not why you're here," I continued. "You're here because you're broke. Because the company shares that were supposed to fund your retirement are worthless." Dad slumped in his chair. "Michael, please, we're family." "Family?" I smiled without humor. "Was I family when you let James take credit for my work? Was I family when you fired me in front of the entire company?" I pulled out a folder. I learned that dramatic revelations were more effective with proper documentation. "Here's what's going to happen. Foster Innovation Labs will buy back your shares in Foster Technologies at their original purchase price." Their eyes widened with hope. "But," I continued, "there are conditions. First, you both sign a non-disclosure agreement about James' activities. Second, you retire, quietly, to that house in Florida you always talked about. Third, you stay out of my business. Completely. You do that for us, Mom whispered. Not for you, I corrected, for the scared 12-year-old boy who used to believe his father hung the moon. He deserved better than what you gave him. Dad started to speak, but I held up my hand. One more thing. The money comes with a trustee, someone who'll make sure you don't gamble it away on another one of James's schemes. Monthly allowance, investment restrictions, the whole package. You don't trust us, Dad said sadly. You taught me that lesson very well. I signed the papers. As security escorted them out, Dad turned back one last time. I was wrong about you, son. You're a better businessman than I ever was. No, Dad, I replied. I'm just better at remembering who my real enemies are. 5 years have passed since then. Foster Innovation Labs is now a billion-dollar company known for its cutting-edge technology and ethical business practices. James served 2 years in prison and now works as a bartender in Vegas. Dad and Mom live quietly in Florida, sending occasional postcards that I never answer. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at my old business school. The topic? The importance of integrity in family business. I accepted with a smile. After all, I have quite a story to tell. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so successful that they have to live with the knowledge that they bet on the wrong horse. And as for those who wonder how the quiet one, the careful one, the backup plan pulled off such a complete victory, well, let's just say that while the peacocks are busy showing off their feathers, the eagles are watching, waiting, and planning their next move. Because in business, just like in life, it's not about who starts at the top. It's about who's still standing when the dust settles. An ambulance? No, we can't call one, my husband shouted, panic evident in his voice. After years apart, we have finally reunited with Naomi, and in her arms was a small child. As I looked closer, it became clear that Naomi was noticeably pregnant. The unexpected situation left my mind blank for a moment, but I quickly realized they needed help. That's when Naomi made a special request. My name is Mary, and I'm 60 years old. I now assist my husband, Isaac, who works as a potter. After graduating from college, I worked as a general office clerk. However, I met Isaac through a pottery event. The event displayed and sold pottery, and there was also an area where you could try your hand at pottery making. Though I had little interest in pottery at the time, a poster at the city hall caught my eye, so I decided to visit. As I wandered around, I found the pottery experience area and learned pottery from Isaac. The experience sparked a deep fascination with pottery in me, and I began visiting his home and workshop to see more of his work. Isaac remembered me, and each time we met, we had engaging conversations. Eventually, our relationship transformed from craftsman and customer to lovers, and after 3 years of dating, we married. Isaac always encouraged me to pursue what I loved, but I was so captivated by pottery that I decided to support his work. By the time we married, his parents had already retired from pottery, which made me even more determined to stand by his side. Amidst all this, we were blessed with a daughter, whom we named Naomi. We showered her with love and affection. When Naomi was 3, Isaac and I wanted her to appreciate the charm of pottery, so we took her to the workshop and let her touch and shape the clay. Naomi showed a natural talent, creating beautiful pieces and taking great joy in her work. As she grew, she expressed a desire to continue the family business, brightening our future even more. Isaac had several apprentices who were all kind and welcoming to the idea of Naomi working there in the future. After graduating high school, Naomi went on to university, where she studied not only pottery but also Japanese history and cultural arts. On holidays and days off from class, she helped with the family business, honing her skills. Thanks to Isaac's guidance from a young age, her talents developed impressively, astonishing everyone around her. However, Naomi never became arrogant. Instead, she continued her efforts to spread the charm of pottery throughout Japan, working closely with her disciples. 5 years passed as Naomi graduated from university, and as she approached 30, we often marveled at how quickly she had grown. Then one day, Naomi shared some surprising news. "Mom, I'm getting married." "Married?" I exclaimed in shock at her sudden announcement. Naomi had a boyfriend since her university days, and while I had anticipated that they might eventually marry, hearing the news still left me speechless. His name was Sean. I had spoken with him several times and felt he was a very good person. Later, Naomi explained the circumstances leading up to their marriage. It seems he had first proposed right after she graduated, but at the time she wanted to focus on continuing the family's pottery business and asked him to wait a little longer. Sean respected her wishes and continued to propose over the years. Time passed, and one day when Naomi felt ready to make a decision, she opened her social media and saw photos of her classmates with their children. Seeing their happiness, she realized it might be time for her to marry too. "Everyone's married with children, and I'm still not," she thought to herself. After reflecting on it, she decided, "I want to marry Sean." "If that's your choice, we have nothing against it," I told her. "Thank you," she replied. Naomi had set a few conditions before accepting Sean's proposal. She wanted to continue working as before and wasn't considering having children for a while. While her classmates with children seemed happy, she wished to maintain her current lifestyle even after marrying. Sean agreed, and they decided to move forward with the marriage. However, I knew that inevitable changes in lifestyle might arise, and Naomi could find some of these unknown changes confusing. I heard that their new home would be near ours, and I wanted to offer as much support as possible. "Feel free to ask us about anything," I told her. "Yes, thank you so much," Naomi replied. The reality of my daughter getting married was still sinking in, and I felt a mix of excitement and nerves when Naomi talked about it. But after hearing her thoughts, I was relieved to know she had made a well-considered decision. I had been hoping Naomi would build a happy family, but this marriage would soon reveal Sean's true character, drastically altering her once joyful life. After leaving home, Naomi started a new life with Sean, and even after their marriage, she frequently returned to her parents' home, allowing us to maintain the close relationship we always had. However, about 6 months into the marriage, we were suddenly informed that they would be moving far away due to a transfer from Sean's company. Sean had known about the potential transfer before marrying Naomi, but had kept it a secret, likely fearing she would leave him if she knew. This revelation made me doubt Sean and wonder if he genuinely considered Naomi's feelings. I asked her, "Are you sure this is okay? Isn't it possible for him to go alone?" Naomi replied that she had suggested staying behind to continue her job, but Sean insisted that he needed her with him. She decided to comply with his request, remembering how he had cared for her in the past. I chose to remain silent, and soon after, Naomi and Sean moved away, leaving me deeply saddened. The students and I, who had spent so much time together with her, felt her absence acutely, which only reaffirmed her importance to us. Half a year later, on what seemed like an ordinary day, I received an astonishing call from Naomi. She had given birth to a child. This was my first grandchild, and while I was overjoyed, questions began to arise. Considering the timing of their move, she must have been pregnant when they left. She had previously mentioned not wanting children for a while, so what changed her mind? And why decide to have a child knowing they were moving? These thoughts began to spread through my mind. When I asked about Naomi's well-being, she assured me everything was fine. If she said it was all right, I felt it wasn't my place to worry further. I ended the call by reminding her that she could always return home if needed. After discussing the situation with Isaac, we concluded that since Sean seemed to be harboring doubts, but Naomi insisted everything was fine, it was better not to pry too deeply. We decided to stay in touch, ready to act immediately if anything happened. However, since the birth of our grandchild, we had received no news, and our worry began to grow. When I couldn't bear it any longer, I tried to contact her, but it was Sean, not Naomi, who answered the phone. "Sean, where's Naomi?" "She's in the bath right now." "I see, I understand," I replied, though I felt uneasy. After Naomi became a full-time housewife and started her new life, I tried calling her cell phone during the day but got no response. When I called again at night, it was Sean who answered, saying Naomi was in the bath, and I couldn't speak to her. I couldn't understand why Sean was always the one answering when I was clearly calling Naomi's number. "Why is it always you answering? I called during the day, and nobody picks up." "She's in the bath, I told you," he replied. "Even in the daytime, I don't know." I was shocked and lost for words at Sean's defiant response. Sensing my silence, he quickly ended the call. Since then, each time I tried to reach her, Sean would come up with reasons like, "The baby is crying, so please stop calling," or, "Isn't this getting a bit excessive?" My suspicion toward Sean only grew, but I was completely taken aback when I finally heard the reason behind his attitude. "The truth is, Naomi doesn't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Could you please stop calling?" he said. "What? Why would she say that? Are you sure this is really what Naomi wants? Your parenting was too strict. She's actually been wanting to leave for a while. She had her apprentices and couldn't easily break away, but now she's out and truly happy. That can't be. Do you think we're deceiving you? Don't you find it strange that your calls don't connect during the day? Naomi is avoiding contact with you. It's about time you understand that." I was utterly shocked. I was at a loss for words, stunned into silence as Sean continued, "Can't you tell by my attitude? Let me be clear, we're bothered by you. I wondered when you'd realize it, but you're incredibly oblivious. If you had noticed from the start, you'd have seen that Naomi never suffered as much as you think. You're too slow to notice anything. That's your answer, so please don't contact us again," he said, and then hung up the phone. "Wait, just a moment," I called out, but my words didn't reach him. After the call ended, I was left with nothing but a sense of emptiness. I tried calling again the next day at noon, but it seemed Sean had blocked my calls, likely to shield Naomi. Reflecting on Sean's past behavior and statements, I began to understand. Was Naomi truly afraid of us? The thought alone made sadness well up within me. When my husband Isaac returned home, I explained the situation about Sean and Naomi. He looked just as sad and lost for words as I was. "So we should probably not get involved anymore, right?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, the reality sinking in. I never imagined Naomi was going through such hard times. We fully believed Sean's story and decided not to contact Naomi anymore. 4 years passed and our family business thrived. Our works found buyers one after another. Our income and fame grew, and not just us, but our apprentices also celebrated the success. As time passed, some apprentices left to become independent, others joined, and we even found a successor to continue the family business, bringing us some peace of mind. However, we never forgot about Naomi. We were constantly worried about her well-being and safety, but we restrained ourselves, not wanting to scare her further, and avoided contact. Then, on an unbelievable day, an intense typhoon struck. As the wind and rain intensified, we took a break from work and stayed home. It had been a while since we could spend time together as a couple during a storm. Late into the night, while we were asleep, the doorbell suddenly rang, waking us up. It must have been around 1:00 a.m. Who could it be at this time of night? Isaac wondered, turning on the light and looking at me. "I don't know," I replied, feeling a mix of anxiety and curiosity. We hesitantly moved toward the entrance. Isaac, gathering his courage, opened the door, and there stood an unexpected figure. "Dad, Mom." Naomi's voice trembled as she spoke. To our disbelief, it was Naomi standing there with a child in her arms, a girl who had lost consciousness, undoubtedly our granddaughter. "She's still alive, but she's in critical condition," Naomi said, her voice strained. As we took a closer look at Naomi, we noticed she was visibly pregnant. "Are you pregnant again?" I asked, my heart racing. 9 months, she replied, her voice barely a whisper while I struggled to keep my panic in check. I quickly realized that both the baby and Naomi were in immediate danger. Before diving into the details, I knew the most important thing was to get them to the hospital as soon as possible. Naomi, desperate and scared, pleaded, "Please call an ambulance." However, Isaac, caught off guard by the intensity of the situation, refused her request. "What are you talking about? There's no way I can call one in this storm," he exclaimed, his frustration slipping out. But then, seeing the fear in Naomi's eyes, he softened. "It's okay. I'll take you to the emergency room tonight." Unfortunately, Isaac had already been drinking and couldn't drive, so I stepped in. I quickly prepared the car and drove Naomi and her child to the hospital myself. Thankfully, we arrived swiftly, and she was able to receive the urgent medical attention she needed. The diagnosis was severe malnutrition for both Naomi and her child. They were immediately hospitalized and began receiving treatment. Thankfully, there was no major impact on the baby, and we felt a momentary relief, knowing they were in good hands. We decided to wait until Naomi had recovered before asking her for the full story. As we arrived at the hospital, Naomi lost consciousness during the examination. While waiting for Isaac to bring clothes for Naomi and her child, I stayed by her side, watching over her as she lay unconscious. The nurses assured me they would take care of her grandchild, which lightened my heart a bit. Looking at Naomi, I noticed the deep fatigue etched into her face. The dark shadows under her eyes told the story of sleepless nights and relentless stress. I had no idea what had happened to her after they moved, but it was clear that she had been through an overwhelming amount of hardship. I quietly watched over Naomi as she slept. Just after 11 a.m., she finally opened her eyes. "Mom," she murmured. "Naomi?" I responded softly, relieved to see her awake. She looked slightly better than yesterday, perhaps due to the rest, but I still couldn't shake the worry. I called the nurse to inform them that Naomi had woken up, and after the doctor examined her, she returned to her room. I approached her quietly, unsure of how to begin. "Naomi, are you okay?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She offered a calm smile and replied, "Yes, I'm fine. Thank you, Mom." "I'm relieved to hear that, but you really gave us a scare." "I'm sorry, Mom. I must have troubled Dad too. He must have been shocked." "We were shocked, but that doesn't matter. We're just worried about you." Naomi didn't seem afraid of us. Instead, she looked relieved. As she lay in bed, we continued our conversation. To us, she was still our beloved daughter, even though she had become Sean's wife. As parents, we couldn't stop worrying about why she had arrived in such an exhausted state and why she had come in the middle of the night. But we hesitated to pry too deeply, so I decided to wait until Naomi was ready to talk on her own. It was okay if she didn't say anything. Her feelings were our priority. As days passed, Naomi visibly regained her energy and began to smile more often. The tension of our reunion after so many years transformed into a sense of relief as she started to open up to us. One day, while visiting Naomi's hospital room with Isaac, we noticed she had a serious, contemplative look on her face. Curious about what was on her mind, we decided to act as usual, though her smile suggested something was different. Eventually, Naomi spoke up, her voice earnest. Can I talk about what happened after I moved?" We were surprised by her sudden words, but it seemed Naomi had resolved to share her story. "Of course. If you want to talk, we're here to listen," I assured her. "Thanks. Then I'll begin." As Naomi started her story, we were astounded by what she revealed. Apparently, Sean was not the person she had thought he was. She had accepted his proposal, believing it would lead to happiness. After years of being in a relationship, she thought she knew him well. But after marrying him, she discovered his true nature. Sean was incredibly possessive, demanding her full attention at all times. He isolated her from her friends, prohibited her from doing anything outside of household chores, and forbade her from leaving the house. He even confiscated her smartphone, cutting off all her means of communication with the outside world. The last time Naomi had informed me about the birth of our grandchild was just before he seized her phone. "Why didn't you seek help earlier?" I asked, shocked. Naomi explained that she thought it would be futile. Sean had convinced her that we despised her and that he was the only one she could rely on. Admitting this left Naomi visibly shaken, and I felt a surge of sadness and anger on her behalf. Naomi had developed a deep fear of us, exacerbated by the severe restrictions imposed on her life. She wasn't allowed proper sleep and was given only a single piece of bread for her daily meal. Even the times she could use the bathroom were strictly controlled, and she wasn't permitted to leave her room outside those times. The extremity of her situation became evident from her harrowing account. Overwhelmed with guilt for raising her child in such dire conditions, Naomi resolved to flee. After seeing her child sleep lifelessly, she was driven by the desperate need to provide a better life. Despite believing her family might dislike her, she decided to return to her hometown for help. Acting swiftly, she sneaked out of the house and caught the last train to reach us. Hearing her confession made everything fall into place. To ensure she wasn't just afraid of us, we asked, and she shook her head in response. "He was lying to you too," she said. I replied, "It's easy to believe what you're told. I'm sorry I didn't notice anything sooner." We then contacted the police and filed a report. A female officer came to the hospital to gather details, and the police immediately raided Sean's house. However, he had already fled, likely in search of Naomi. The police increased patrols around the hospital and our home, anticipating his return. Weeks later, Naomi gave birth while still hospitalized and was discharged with her child. We breathed a sigh of relief at the arrival of the new life. With the family business left in the capable hands of apprentices and Isaac back at home, we felt more secure. Although the situation remained precarious, seeing Naomi's smile like she used to filled us with happiness. We deeply hoped for these peaceful days to continue, but reality often defies our expectations. One seemingly peaceful afternoon, while preparing lunch, a sudden noise came from the second floor where no one was supposed to be. Isaac, who had been relaxed, noticed the sound and said, "I'll go check upstairs." We would have ignored such a noise before, but ever since Naomi's incident, we had been living on high alert. I told Naomi and her children to stay close and watch for any signs of trouble, clutching my smartphone. Then a shout echoed from the second floor, "What are you doing?" It was clear there was a scuffle with an intruder.
Even if you attempt to trouble us, there's hardly any loss on your part, considering it's your funds, useless to poor people with lowly lineage. I sighed as I completed the final check. "You're closing your account, right? Please, go ahead," I said with a tone that seemed mocking. Their eyes, filled with clear disdain, made me feel disgusted as they stared at us. I decided it was time to give those who judge others by their upbringing a taste of their own medicine. With that thought, I smiled. "My name is Tiffany, a 29-year-old office worker. Currently, I'm living a peaceful life with my mom while working. My dad passed away from an illness when I was young. His chronic illness had worsened early. My father, who was involved in various businesses, was always busy with work, out early and back late. Even so, he treasured his family time, and I have fond memories of playing with him on his days off. Mom and I were initially shocked by Dad's death, but Mom, not wanting me to feel lonely, cherished our time together. Fortunately, when Dad fell ill, he made sure with the former CEO to secure enough funds for our livelihood. Thanks to that, I was able to go to college, and both Dad's and Mom's parents were very supportive, especially my paternal grandparents, who lived nearby, took great care of me when Mom was away at work. We still go back to both sets of grandparents for holidays like Christmas and spend time together. I am who I am today thanks to the support of many people. To give back, I went to a national university and got a job at a major company. I thought about working at the bank my dad was supposed to inherit, but I chose a career I loved. As you're being told, do what you love. I've already handed the bank over, don't worry about it. Thanks to a fulfilling home environment and the freedom to dive into hobbies, I had no interest in romance. But now, at a mature age, many of my friends are married with kids. This led me to think about marriage, and that's when a certain encounter happened. I never imagined this meeting would lead to a major incident. "Hey, Tiffany, aren't you interested in love, huh?" That was the starting point, a question from a colleague at work. We've been close since our rookie days. You know, I have an acquaintance who's struggling to find a match. He's well-educated and handsome. You're highly educated too, Tiffany. Maybe you'd like to meet him. I've always thought it's a waste for someone as eloquent as you, Tiffany. There are even a few people in the office who are after you. She has a wide network and always shares various stories. She's living with her boyfriend, whom she met at a party, and seems very happy. She's quite concerned about my lack of romantic involvement. I had even consulted her about marriage, leading to this arrangement. A few days later, I agreed to meet a man named Yves. The rendezvous was at a cafe, and as I waited nervously, a man approached me. "Tiffany? Ah, yes, nice to meet you. You're Yves, right?" I said, feeling a bit anxious. "Yes, thank you for today." Yosef's expression was blank as he looked me over. It felt like he was sizing me up, and I was a bit taken aback. Then, taking a seat opposite me, he quickly started the conversation. "What do you do for work, Tiffany?" he inquired. "I work in sales at a company. I've always enjoyed interacting with people and making use of my opinions, which is why I chose sales. I find it fulfilling, and I love the moments when customers are happy with their purchases. I replied, trying to ease the tension. What's the name of your company? He asked. I told him the name of my company. Upon hearing it, Is paused for a moment, then smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile, more like one of satisfaction. My company is quite a large enterprise with good performance. We're well trusted by our customers, he said, his tone slightly arrogant. Since he asked, I decided to return the question. What do you do, Yes? At my question, Is snorted with pride and began to boast. I work at Sunrise Bank as a department head. Sunrise Bank is a really big bank, you know. The work is tough, not something ordinary people can handle. But since my dad is the CEO and I'm the successor, it's different for me. I felt a stir in my chest at Yosef's words. I was expecting a normal response, but Yosef's aggressively toned words made me feel uncomfortable. Indeed, Sunrise Bank is a major bank. I knew about Sunrise Bank due to a certain incident, but I was surprised to learn that Yos worked there as a department head. Wow, that's impressive. Sunrise Bank is a big place, isn't it? I flattered Yos on purpose. I saw no need to be rude, and though I thought this would probably be our last meeting, I figured it was better to be nice. Pleased with my flattery, Yos continued to boast about himself. Honestly, talking to him was painful. He did listen to me occasionally, but always turned the conversation back to himself, even making outrageous comments about his lack of romantic prospects. I'm quite popular, you know, but it's always people who don't match my family background or education level that come to me. I thought the problem might be his attitude, but I had already decided not to meet him again after informing my friend. As time passed, he still looked satisfied and made a suggestion. I'd really like to meet your parents, huh? But we just met today. That's exactly why parents' excellence is important, especially if we're going to date, right? Inside, I screamed. I had no intention of dating him. But he seemed oblivious to my discomfort and kept pushing forward. When are your parents in? Are you available? I'll have to discuss it with my mom. What about your dad? As Yos pressed on, I felt a growing sense of disgust, but couldn't find the strength to cut him off. My dad passed away when I was young. At my words, Yos narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, waiting for him to speak, Yos just said, I see, and fell silent, pondering. Well, send me a date that works for you later. I'll adjust my schedule. No, thank you. Should we leave then? Before I could finish, Yos stood up. It felt like talking to someone from a different world, despite my reluctance. I had given him my contact information and even discussed meeting our parents. His disdainful look upon hearing about my father's absence bothered me. In the end, we agreed to meet again with our parents. When I explained this to Mom, she smiled. Riley, maybe you were just nervous because you haven't dated before, she said reassuringly. Maybe, but the way he spoke was weird. Well, his parents will be there, right? Just say no if it doesn't feel right. I'll be there too, I replied, feeling guilty. Thanks, Mom. Sorry for dragging you into this, I apologized. Mom laughed heartily. It's okay. No need for you to feel bad. Besides, I'm curious about Sunrise Bank, so let's see how it goes. So, Yos and I've arranged a family meeting. At that time, I had no idea Yos had planned the meeting for such a shocking purpose. On the day of the meeting, we arrived at the place Yos had chosen. It was a fancy restaurant. It's a big place, isn't it? I remarked as we entered. Yes, it is, Mom agreed. Inside, our table was ready, but Yos hadn't arrived yet. We entered and waited, and shortly after the scheduled time, Yos and his family arrived. Sorry we're late. The traffic was terrible. Nice to meet you. Thank you for today. Yosef's family unapologetically took their seats. Irritated but not wanting to start a fight, I initiated the family meeting. After some time, Yosef's mom, Morgan, with a sly smile, spoke up. So, where is your father? Is he coming later? She inquired, looking around. I looked at Yos, but he just smirked dismissively and said nothing. I had already told him my dad was deceased. Morgan acted as if she didn't know. despite having agreed to meet our families. Mom quickly responded, "In my stead, my husband passed away from illness when Tiffany was young. So today, I'm here as her mother," Mom responded with a calm smile. In contrast, Morgan raised her voice in an exaggerated manner. "Oh my, Tiffany is from a single-parent family." Her words took me aback. Even after explaining that my father had passed away from illness, her tone clearly carried malice. "Being from a single-parent family, life must be quite hard, huh? But she graduated from a public university. That's commendable, right? Really, but still, being from a single-parent family, wouldn't dating her be complicated?" Ye's family's conversation left Mom and me utterly dumbfounded. Despite being present, they spoke so disrespectfully, mocking us as if being from a single-parent family was something bad. Such words weren't suitable for a first meeting. Angered, I retorted in a low voice, "Excuse me, but after Dad passed away, Mom raised me with great care. I owe my current life to her. And isn't it rude to speak about someone like that when you've just met, Tiffany?" However, Morgan burst out laughing at my words. "Rude, isn't it? More absurd for the daughter of a single parent to think about marrying into a high-class family. I'm not really into strong-willed women. This is pointless. There's no getting through to them." Thinking this, I just stared at them in disbelief. I had high hopes since she works at a major company. "Well, you'll eventually carry on Sunrise Bank, so maybe she's not quite at your level." As they hurled more insults, I felt no need to listen anymore. Trembling with anger, Mom glared at them. "Did you invite us here today just to look down on us? I've heard from Tiffany about the other day. You're enjoying berating us for being a single-parent family, aren't you?" Her words took me aback. Even after explaining that my father had passed away from illness, her tone clearly carried malice. "Being from a single-parent family, life must be quite hard, huh? But she graduated from a public university. That's commendable, right? Really, but still, being from a single-parent family, wouldn't dating her be complicated?" Ye's family's conversation left Mom and me utterly dumbfounded. Despite being present, they spoke so disrespectfully, mocking us as if being from a single-parent family was something bad. Such words weren't suitable for a first meeting. Angered, I retorted in a low voice, "Excuse me, but after Dad passed away, Mom raised me with great care. I owe my current life to her. And isn't it rude to speak about someone like that when you just met, Tiffany?" However, Morgan burst out laughing at my words. "Rude, isn't it? More absurd for the daughter of a single parent to think about marrying into a high-class family. I'm not really into strong-willed women. This is pointless. There's no getting through to them." Thinking this, I just stared at them in disbelief. I had high hopes since she works at a major company. "Well, you'll eventually carry on Sunrise Bank, so maybe she's not quite at your level." As they hurled more insults, I felt no need to listen anymore. Trembling with anger, Mom glared at them. "Did you invite us here today just to look down on us? I've heard from Tiffany about the other day. You're enjoying berating us for being a single-parent family, aren't you?" It was the first time I heard her speak so sternly. "Please stop with the accusations. It was just a little teasing, right? No one feels good being mocked, and all your remarks are condescending. We have no intention of listening to this any further." Ye's family looked displeased at Mom's clear statement. Presumptuous for commoners, huh? Indeed, that may be the case. But this has made up my mind. Ye's family looked briefly surprised at Mom's words, then burst into laughter. They seemed to be thinking, "What can you possibly do?" Mom sighed and began to speak. "Actually, we have funds deposited with your bank, but we don't wish to entrust them to people like you." "Oh, really? But we don't know your name, so it can't be much, right? It's probably insignificant." "That's right. Even if you try to trouble us with your fun, it won't really affect us. Low-class poor people are not needed." I realized that even Mom's last attempt at reconciliation was in vain. But they continued to speak disdainfully, unaware. I sighed and made the final confirmation. "We're closing our account." "Okay, go ahead. Yosef's family responded with mocking tones and clearly disdainful expressions as they looked at us. I thought to myself, let's make those who judge others by their background suffer a bit. I smiled at the thought. Is that so? Then we will proceed as such. And please consider this meeting never happened, Yosef's family declared. Of course, I replied calmly, knowing we had no intention of marrying into a family with such prejudices. Well then, we will take our leave now, Mom, and I stood up. Oh, don't worry about today's bill. It's too expensive for you, they remarked. Is that so? Well then, with that, our family meeting ended. Later, I made a phone call. Weeks later, my mobile phone was flooded with calls from Yes. Of course, I had anticipated this and had no intention of answering. It was their own responsibility. I immediately blocked the number. A few days later, I received a call from Grandpa Kyle. Summoned by Kyle, Mom and I headed to Sunrise Bank in the meeting room. Ye's family, looking pale, was present. As soon as they saw us, Morgan stood up and rushed over to bow deeply. I am extremely sorry for what happened, she said. I didn't reply to Morgan's words, just smiled and began to speak. What exactly are you apologizing for? At my words, Morgan bit her lip hard, trembling with anger. That's understandable. There are too many things for which they should apologize. That's probably why she's feeling so frustrated. This whole situation started because I said we would close our account. That day, our account wasn't particularly large. Closing it wouldn't have caused much damage. But Kyle's case was different. Kyle managed the inheritance left by my dad at Sunrise Bank for our benefit. Kyle also had his own account there. If all accounts, including Kyle's and my dad's inheritance, were closed, it would total about $7,000 million. In other words, their disrespect decided the closure. And importantly, Kyle is the former CEO of the bank. Dad was supposed to take over the bank but passed away young, so the position went to Scott. I didn't know that Tiffany was related to the former CEO, Scott. Looking anxious, Yosef pleaded as if making an excuse. But that's no excuse. Even if they didn't know, their prejudice against our family is their own fault. You mean, if we were relatives, you would have treated us differently? Dad interjected. Hey, don't talk to Dad like that. It's your fault for not telling us from the start that your grandpa was the former CEO. I don't have any obligation to tell a stranger like you that. Besides, you were the one who started it and made fun of us, remember? I countered, causing Yosef to narrow his eyes in frustration. You insulted me knowing I was from a single-parent family. When I said I would transfer the bank due to insecurity, you told us to go ahead. We just did as we were told. But it's just that it may be just that for you. But have you ever thought about the feelings of someone whose family has been insulted? Silence fell. Morgan was trembling, looking hopeless, and Scott was hanging his head. But Yosef still seemed unconvinced, his face full of dissatisfaction. Getting all high and mighty just because people talk to you. Yosef remains unrepentant. At that moment, the door to the conference room opened and Kyle appeared. Seeing Kyle, Yosef's tone grew defiant, and Morgan turned even paler. Frozen in place, only Yosef glared at me. Even after giving you a chance to reflect, you're still only thinking about yourselves, Kyle said, his tone stern. It's not my fault. It's her. Watch your words. If you continue, you'll end up even more miserable. Yosef, silenced by Kyle's words, glared at me again. Then, as if resigned, he burst out, "No way. Who would think a single parent's relative was the former CEO? You knew I was the future CEO and came to the family meeting just to mock us." Yosef, be quiet. Kyle glared sternly, causing Yosef to breathe heavily. Future CEO, huh? Kyle then turned his gaze to Scott, who shrunk even more under Kyle's stare. I understand wanting to leave the bank to your son, but now that I know his mindset, it's impossible for him to continue as CEO. That's ridiculous, Scott started to retort, but sat down again under Kyle's gaze. You still don't understand that your attitude is the problem. Though I'm retired, the board will decide. If you have something to say, say it to them. Remember, we recorded the previous conversation, and this one. Don't forget that the voice recorder will serve as evidence. I took out a voice recorder in front of the three and pressed play. The recorder started playing back our conversation from the other day. How dare you prepare something like that? It's unfair, Yosef exclaimed. It was just a precaution, but remember, you forced me into this situation. I countered. Yosef had nothing to say in return, and their faces turned pale. Thank you, we'll handle it from here, they said. So Mom and I left. Ultimately, Kyle didn't transfer the funds, at least not officially. Scott was removed from his CEO position, and Yosef was demoted. Seemingly unable to handle the blow to his pride, Yosef resigned voluntarily. Kyle's influence in the financial industry meant Yosef would struggle to find work in the same field again. Whether Scott knew this or not, he seemed determined to work until retirement, but Kyle said it would be tough for him both mentally and physically. Morgan, who used to wield power as the CEO's wife, apparently started part-time work to maintain her lifestyle, but her character likely made it hard for her to keep a job. I'm really sorry, I said. It's okay. You didn't know, right? Mom replied. I only shared what happened with a friend who introduced me to Yosef. She just heard about him through someone else and wasn't at fault. Mom was initially concerned about being a single parent, but I'm happy now and can live thanks to the support I've received. When I told her that, she smiled and said thank you. After everything was taken care of, Kyle told us to come over to his house again sometime. I'm really grateful for Kyle's help in resolving the situation. He was tough, but I'm happy now, so it's okay. I have some good news for you, Mom said one day. Really? It's not about dating again, is it? I teased. It's a friend of my boyfriend this time. He's definitely a good guy. I'm not interested in dating right now, but I'm satisfied with my current life. I want to keep cherishing those who support me. And maybe someday I'll meet someone I really click with.
I don't like anything about you, Mother, said my eldest son's wife. We want to live with our family alone, so get out. I was shocked to hear these words. It reminded me of when I had to leave my own parents' home. Now, I felt angry at the idea of being kicked out of this house too. Fine, I'll leave, I said, gathering my things to go. This was too much. I was determined never to forgive my eldest son's wife. It was time to put my plan into action. So, my name is Sandra Clark, and I'm 61 years old this year. I'm technically retired, but I'm still lucky enough to have some work. I don't go to the office every day anymore. Sometimes I drop by and attend meetings, but mostly I work from home. My oldest son seems to think I'm not working anymore, which isn't true. I became a widow when I was in my 40s. Right now, I live with my oldest son and his wife. Our family home has been in our family for a long time. It's a bit old and needs some fixing up, but I've always loved it. That's why leaving was hard. I've never had to worry much about money. My late husband's insurance money is still mostly untouched. I've been able to live comfortably without worrying about my future. Even though it might seem like I have an easy life, there are some things that bother me. It's mostly my oldest son's wife, Jessica. She's strong-willed and we often clash. This tension didn't just start recently. It goes back to when she first told us they were getting married. I still remember the outfit she wore when she first came to meet us. She showed up in a tracksuit that looked like something she wore back in high school. She said she wanted to be real with us, but I couldn't help but find it a bit odd. It's not exactly lying, but it felt like she was trying too hard to prove something. She's also very argumentative and smart, which can be challenging. I couldn't understand why my oldest son chose her as his partner. Later, I found out that Jessica was the one who pursued him. She's bold, I'll give her that, and she's attractive too. I think my son, who's a bit naive and sheltered, fell for her charm. Even after they decided to marry, things didn't change much. To put it nicely, she's straightforward. To be blunt, sometimes she lacks common sense in how she acts. I really wanted to object to their marriage, but I reminded myself that it's what my son wanted, so I kept my peace. And now, we're facing the consequences of that decision. After my son and Jessica got married, he insisted that we all live together in our family home. I thought Jessica might disagree, but she was actually okay with the idea. It didn't take long for me to understand why. However, once we started living together, Jessica never lifted a finger to help with household chores. She left everything for me to do, cleaning, laundry, cooking. Despite being a full-time housewife herself, she had quit her job when they got married. Even though I work remotely and don't have to go to the office every day, I still have less free time than Jessica. While I'm working on my computer, Jessica would make comments belittling my work, saying I'm just goofing off. At first, I brushed it off to avoid arguments, but it bothered me more and more as it kept happening. Jessica, since you have some free time, could you help out with the cleaning? I asked, noticing her lounging and watching TV. She looked at me with disgust, sighed dramatically, and replied, I don't do housework for your own good, mother. Can't you see that? It's a shame you don't appreciate my consideration. She had this strange theory where she believed if she did the housework, it would be bad for my health. According to her, seniors need to stay active, and doing chores would make me sedentary and possibly lead to dementia. So she was actually doing me a favor by letting me handle everything. Her reasoning was so bizarre it gave me a headache. Then she said something even more shocking. I agreed to live together to keep you from slacking off, mother. She said it with a half smile, leaving me speechless. I regretted agreeing to live together more and more every day. Doing all the housework while being watched by Jessica was nothing but torture. Fed up with the situation, I decided to talk to my eldest son, but it wasn't to complain about Jessica. I decided to move to an apartment where I could live alone. The current house we're in is old and has many stairs, which became difficult for me after I hurt my back last year. I talked to my son about the challenges of living here, and then I moved to an apartment. Even though it felt like Jessica pushed me out, I don't regret leaving. The new apartment is a rental. It might be a bit big for just me, but I got a room big enough for my grandchildren to stay in the future. I had the inside designed just the way I like it, and it felt like my own little castle. But my happiness didn't last long because Jessica started coming over every day and staying until late. The new apartment is really nice, huh? Maybe too big for you, Mom? Jessica said, lounging on the couch. Why don't you come back to your old home and do the chores? It's for your health and longevity. It's unbelievable that Jessica is telling me to go back to the old house and do the chores. During the day, she's so self-centered, it's overwhelming. I've already moved out. You need to take responsibility as the wife. I handle all the chores here, and my health checkups are always fine, Jessica. You don't need to worry about me. But Jessica just turned away, ignoring my words. Ignoring anything inconvenient was her usual tactic. Yet, she kept coming to my apartment every day. Just recently, she said it's too much trouble to go back home and ended up spending the night. My parents' house and this apartment are only about a 15-minute walk apart. It was my eldest son who suggested I live closer to my parents' house because he was concerned. His concern made me a little sad to leave the old house. One day, after I had been out for work-related errands, I came back in the evening to a surprise. To my shock, Jessica had let herself into my apartment. It seemed she used the spare key I had given to my son without my knowledge. Welcome back, she said, lying on the floor in front of the TV without even bothering to get up. Jessica, that spare key is for emergencies only, not for you to come in whenever I'm not home. I felt uneasy knowing she had been in my apartment while I was away. It was the first time I firmly told her so. She seemed surprised, as I usually let things slide quickly. She gave me an annoyed look, but I stood my ground. You really are a difficult mother-in-law. I can't stand that about you. Jessica started yelling at me. I can't stand anything about you, not even this apartment. We're a family, so you should leave. With that, she tried to push me out the door. It seemed Jessica couldn't bear the idea of me living in the apartment. She was upset that they were still in the old house while I was here, calling it unfair. James is paying the rent for this place, right? It wouldn't be strange for us, his family, to live here. That's what it means to live beyond your means. Jessica seemed to think my son was covering the rent for the apartment. This explained why she kept showing up here. In her mind, the apartment should have been for her family to live in. Fine, I'll leave, I said firmly, staring her down. I agreed to move out within 3 days, which seemed to surprise her. Right in front of her, I called a moving company and arranged for them to come in 2 days. As Jessica left feeling satisfied, I watched her go, already planning my next move. True to my word, I moved out. My new place was an apartment specifically designed for seniors. I decided to test it out for 2 weeks. I handed over the keys and lease documents to Jessica, asking for a change in the contract through the real estate agent to the landlord. Luckily, I've known the landlord for a long time, so they were flexible and accommodating, which was a relief. My eldest son was furious with Jessica for kicking me out. He's even considering divorce, but Jessica doesn't seem to care. In fact, she started living alone in my apartment, saying, "Well then, let's live separately." I'm amazed at how bold she is. But in 5 days, Jessica will find out the truth. While I was working from home, my phone started ringing incessantly. It was Jessica calling. I had been expecting this, so I had a recorder ready to record the conversation. I pressed the record button and answered the call. "Excuse me, Mother, what's the deal with the rent for this apartment? Why do I have to pay it?" Jessica started ranting as soon as I picked up the phone. She sounded flustered. "Well, Jessica, you're the current leaseholder, so it's only fair that you pay. Is there a problem?" I purposely kept my tone calm and relaxed to annoy Jessica. She seemed even more agitated but didn't back down. "But didn't James used to pay the rent here? We're not even divorced yet, so shouldn't James pay?" Jessica had told my eldest son about the rent issue and he advised her to call me. The truth was, my son had never paid the rent. In fact, I had been financially supporting him. After retiring, I continued working as a consultant and advisor, earning a good salary. I was actually earning more than my son. I had been secretly helping him out because Jessica tended to spend a lot. "It's just a misunderstanding, Jessica. Originally, I was the one paying the rent for that place. I never made James pay a dime." Jessica seemed shocked and caught off guard by the truth. She quickly said what she wanted to and hung up the phone. Right away, I contacted my eldest son and played him the recorded conversation. "I've been putting up with it too, but I can't take it anymore. You feel the same way, don't you?" I knew my son was exhausted from dealing with Jessica's debts. No matter how old he gets, as a parent, I can't help but want to help him out. Some might say I'm too soft, but I think it's just natural as a parent. My son replied quietly, "I'll divorce her, I'm tired too." Then follow my lead. I told him my plan and gave him instructions. First, I asked him to take a few days of paid leave starting today. Then, I told him to quietly move out his important belongings without letting Jessica know. We didn't want her to notice any moving trucks, as she might be nearby. I had instructed him to slowly move his things out during the night, keeping it discreet. The important belongings were taken to a single-family home that I had found as our new residence. This way, the plan progressed without Jessica knowing. 3 days later, Jessica called again, sounding even more flustered than before. "What? Why are you so worked up? Just like last time." I kept my tone deliberately relaxed as Jessica sounded overly anxious, almost in a state of panic. "Mother, our house is up for sale. And I got a call from my parents saying that my belongings have arrived at their house. What does that mean?" Jessica explained that her parents had received her belongings and our old house was now on the market. It seemed my eldest son had followed my instructions. He had sent Jessica's things to her parents' house and put our old house up for sale, leaving it empty. The landlord told me that if I can't pay the rent, I should leave. I thought I should consult with James, and when I got home, there were chains and a padlock on the gate, and I couldn't get in. There's even a for sale sign up. Jessica was almost hysterical. It must have been quite a shock for her to come home to. "I've already entered into a sales contract with a realtor. We can't access that house anymore," Jessica had began, ready to express all the pent-up frustration. "Firstly, I'm no longer your mother-in-law, right? Yesterday, James should have filed for divorce. You signed it, didn't you? You and I are strangers now." Yesterday, my eldest son had filed for divorce at the city office. It turns out Jessica had signed the papers a while ago. Threatening divorce seemed to be a tactic she often used. My son used to believe that Jessica would change someday. After all, she was the person he loved enough to marry. He felt trapped into giving in to her threats of divorce, he once told me. But it seems my son has finally realized the truth. He signed the divorce papers, which had always been used as leverage, and submitted them. The divorce has been officially processed. "You always used to tell James that you could divorce anytime. Are you happy now that things have turned out your way, Jessica?" I could sense Jessica holding her breath on the other end of the phone. She wanted to argue back, but seemed lost for words. She must have been feeling frustrated. "Besides, I'm worried about you. After the divorce, how will you manage to live in that apartment without a job? Moving also costs money, and it's tough. How did you even afford it? Jessica's anger was no longer hidden. She yelled and cursed at me. She had claimed she married my son because of the inheritance he received from my late husband. However, I control all the inheritance and she can't touch a penny of it. Despite marrying to clear debts, she screamed that nothing was going well for her. Of course, I made sure my son listened to this conversation too. If it came to a divorce settlement, I'd plan to use the recording as evidence. I thought it was the end, so I patiently waited for Jessica to finish her tantrum. She ranted for about 15 minutes without pause. Then, in the end, she started begging me for help, crying. She confessed that she had been disowned by her family. With nowhere else to go, she pleaded for my assistance. It suddenly clicked for me. Something had felt off at the wedding, and now I understood what it was. Jessica had no place to go, no home to return to. Despite feeling a bit sorry for her, I couldn't ignore the consequences of her actions. Apologizing now won't change anything. We're strangers now. There's nothing more to discuss. Good luck with your life from here on, I said before ending the call with Jessica. I felt a sense of relief afterward. It seems Jessica caused trouble at my eldest son's workplace. He told me things escalated to the point of involving the police when he returned home. Jessica, who had been staying at the apartment without paying rent, had her keys changed by the landlord while she was out. Now, she can't even get into her own apartment. She might have tried to contact me or my son, but we had canceled our phones and got new ones with new numbers. I can only imagine the despair she felt when she realized she couldn't reach us no matter how many times she tried. We didn't give her our new address either, so she can't reach us that way. After causing a scene at my son's company, she was issued a restraining order. With no other options, it seems Jessica turned to her disowned family for help. However, when she returned home, she was met with a shocking sight. The luggage I had sent to her family's house was left out in the rain in the backyard, and she wasn't even allowed inside the house. It's likely that the unpaid rent for the apartment had been billed to her parents, adding to their anger. I heard rumors that she's currently staying in an apartment provided by an organization that supports homeless people. Without the ability to spend as she did before, she seemed stressed when I passed her on the street. I was stunned to see how much her hair had turned white and how dry her skin looked. She had changed so much. I hardly recognized Jessica at first. It made me realize just how much a change in living conditions can affect a person. I've started a new life in the house I bought with my late husband's inheritance. It's a duplex, so my son can remarry whenever he wants. For now, he joins me for dinner, but otherwise, he takes care of his own things. I've found that this distance works well for us. The money from selling my parents' home is safe for future needs. I plan to use it for my son and his future wife when they marry. And of course, I'll keep some aside for any future grandchildren. I'm thinking of creating the English garden I've always dreamed of in my new home. On days when I'm not working, I spend time in the garden, caring for the young trees and herbs. This new life, filled with hope, has become my daily routine.
On the day my mom passed away, my sister-in-law made a hurtful joke, saying I slept in and missed the funeral. She then mentioned she wouldn't be attending. It made me angry because she had convinced my sick mom to spend a lot of money on a new house, and now she was acting this way. Trying to keep calm, I warned her she'd regret it, but she just hung up. Later, at the funeral, even my usually gentle brother was furious with her. My name's Lisa. I'm 28, single, and have a good job that keeps me busy. Despite everything, I'm doing okay. Today is a day off from work, so I went back to my mom's place after a long time. I greeted her, and we had a nice chat over tea. My mom is a kind and elegant person, but she's been living alone since my dad passed away a few years ago. Both Dad and I always worried about her health because she's not very strong. Whenever I have time off, I make sure to visit Mom and spend time with her. During our chat, I asked if anything troublesome had happened lately. Just as she was about to tell me, the doorbell rang. Mom said it might be Stephanie. Stephanie is my brother's wife. They recently got married, and she's my sister-in-law. I often wonder how my quiet brother ended up with someone as talkative and pretty as her. Although I sometimes find her unexpected visits a bit annoying, I appreciate her caring about our mom. When Stephanie came in, she greeted us cheerfully. She mentioned how long it had been since we last met and then started talking about my job in accounting. She said she's too busy with housework and hinted that it would be nice if I got married soon too. Yeah, maybe my sister-in-law acts timid around my mom, but sometimes she makes these sneaky comments to me. I'm not sure if she's trying to be mean, but it definitely makes me feel uneasy. Looks like my sister-in-law's here too, so I'll head out, I told Mom when I said goodbye. She agreed and said we should catch up more next time before seeing me off. As I left, I couldn't help but wonder if Mom was really okay with my sister-in-law. She's not one to gossip or complain, so I worry she might be keeping her feelings inside. A few months later, Mom told me that my brother was building a fancy new house. My brother makes a good living, but he's not super rich, right? And my sister-in-law doesn't work, so how are they affording such a big house? I wondered aloud. Well, I actually helped him out with some money from your father's inheritance. Mom confessed. How much? I asked. Around $20,000, Mom replied. $20K? Mom, are you serious? I exclaimed in shock. My dad always taught my brother and me to be self-sufficient once we grew up, so I couldn't understand why Mom would give away such a large amount of money. Stephanie, your sister-in-law, kept coming over almost every week, asking for help. I just couldn't say no, especially since Andrew and Stephanie promised to take care of me when we all lived together. I felt like I had to help, Mom explained. Well, if you're sure about it, Mom, but aren't you worried you're giving too much? I asked. No, not at all. This will make things easier for you, Lisa. I'm actually excited about our new life together, Mom replied with a smile. They went ahead and built their house, and my brother, his wife, and Mom moved in together. When I visited to give them a housewarming gift, I was amazed by their luxurious house. It had a modern kitchen and bathroom, fancy interior with real wood, and a big backyard. There was no way my brother could afford all of this on his own. My sister-in-law proudly gave me a tour of the house, and when it was over, I pulled my brother aside quietly. Congratulations on the new house, Andrew. Please make sure to take good care of Mom. Thank you, Lisa. Don't worry, Stephanie will take care of Mom while I'm at work, he assured me. I felt guilty about Mom contributing money, but we're determined to ensure she's even happier from now on. It seems my brother wasn't aware that his wife had been asking Mom for money for the new house. He's a good and kind person, but sometimes he can be a bit clueless. Okay, just make sure you both take care of Mom. And you, focus on your job, I advised. Let's not talk about work. Oh, sorry, my bad, he replied. After our conversation, I gave my brother an envelope with some cash and a standing clock. This clock can help monitor health, so please put it somewhere in the living room where Mom can see it easily. Wow, this clock is really advanced, huh? But it could be helpful for Mom. And it looks stylish too. Let's place it here, my brother said, setting the clock on a shelf in the living room. I should head home now. Take care, I said. My sister-in-law was busy on the phone in another room, so I left the impressive house with my mom and brother seeing me off. 6 months had passed, and it seemed like my mom, who had been a worry, was doing well with my brother and his wife. I was able to focus on my work, thinking that these peaceful days would continue until I received the heartbreaking news of my mom's passing. When my brother came back from work, he found our mother had stopped breathing. It appeared she had passed away alone in her room. The doctors at the hospital said her existing heart condition, worsened by stress, was likely the cause of death. Mom, why now? I wish I had come home sooner. I'm so sorry, my brother and I held onto our now lifeless mother, tears streaming down our faces. My sister-in-law, Stephanie, was not there at the time. Brother, wasn't Stephanie supposed to be home? And what do they mean by overwork? I asked, feeling puzzled. No, she wasn't home. And about the overwork, I'm not sure. Stephanie took care of all the household chores, so it doesn't make sense, my brother replied, sounding confused. Feeling uneasy, I said, well, first things first, we need to arrange Mom's wake and funeral. You'll probably need to take the lead as the chief mourner, Andrew. You're right, Lisa. Can you help me? My brother asked. So my brother and I started working hard to prepare for the memorial service. It was chaotic, trying to organize everything for my mother's funeral, finding a place, making plans, reaching out to people, and more. Somehow, we managed to get through the wake, and the next day was the funeral. While my brother and I were busy with visitors, my sister-in-law just sat around doing nothing. Stephanie didn't lend a hand or show any emotion. Despite feeling increasingly frustrated with her, the hustle and bustle of the moment kept me from confronting her. Andrew, tomorrow's the funeral, and you'll be quite occupied as the chief mourner. Why don't you and Stephanie go home for a bit? I'll stay here, I suggested. Yeah, I appreciate that, Lisa. Thank you, my brother replied. After they left, I got my work laptop out in the now empty room and started working. I barely slept throughout the night. The next morning on the day of the funeral, even though it was scheduled to start at 10 a.m., I met up with my brother at 6 a.m. to get ready. We were swamped with preparations, going over the eulogy my brother had written as the chief mourner, meeting with the funeral director, and more. My brother mentioned that Stephanie would join us later for the actual funeral. And then, around 9:30 a.m., I got a call from Stephanie. Hello, Lisa. I'm calling because Andrew isn't answering his phone. Okay, and, I just woke up, overslept. I won't be able to make it to the funeral. Struggling to keep my voice steady and not let my anger show, I replied, okay, but you might regret missing it, you know. Stephanie, I don't think that's a good decision. Anyway, I understand you're busy, but try to hang in there, I said before Stephanie hung up. Hey, was that Stephanie just now? My brother approached and asked. Yeah, she overslept and said she's not coming today, I replied. What? That's unbelievable. It's our mother's funeral, my brother exclaimed. Let's just focus on the funeral, Andrew. I'll talk to you about something afterward, I said, trying to keep things calm. Somehow, we made it through the funeral together. My brother and I paid our respects to our mother's remains, but Stephanie was still nowhere to be found. What was she thinking, not showing up for her own mother-in-law's funeral? By the way, Lisa, what did you want to show me? My brother asked, trying to shift focus. Sure, Andrew. Take a look at this, I said, pulling out my laptop. What is Displayed on the screen was the living room of my brother's house. It dawned on my brother that the clock I had given him as a gift had a hidden camera installed, meant for keeping an eye on elderly folks or pets. I had given it out of concern for Mom, but since she seemed fine, I didn't want to invade anyone's privacy, so I hadn't looked at it until now. However, yesterday, I decided to check the footage from the past week. Here it is, I said, opening a few videos. My brother watched them closely, holding his breath. What the footage showed was heartbreaking. My sister-in-law was exploiting our mother, harshly assigning all the household chores and tasks to her, from cooking to laundry to cleaning. My frail mother was being forced to work to exhaustion. While Mom was busy with the housework, Stephanie would slack off and go out. In the footage, you could occasionally see Mom clutching her chest in discomfort and hesitating to call someone on her phone, only to decide against it. Mom couldn't tell us about the mistreatment she was enduring from Stephanie. She always wanted our happiness, you know, Mom. I had no idea. Please forgive me, both my brother and I sobbed. The pain of seeing our mother in such a situation was almost unbearable. Lisa, can we see the footage from the day Mom passed away? My brother asked me. I haven't checked it, but Mom passed away in her own room, so I don't think we have any recording of her, I replied, setting the recorded footage to the date our mother passed away. After finishing her morning chores, my mother was seen clutching her chest as she headed towards her room. They said she passed away around 2 p.m. The living room was empty for a while. But as we fast-forwarded the recording, Andrew spoke up, Hey here, stop it and turn up the volume. Around noon, my sister-in-law appeared on the camera. When we turned up the volume, we could hear her voice. Hey, mother-in-law, mother-in-law. My sister-in-law called out towards my mother's room. But when there was no response, she seemed to assume my mother wasn't there. She then sat down on the sofa and made a phone call. Hello, thanks for being with me just now. It seems like the old lady is out and about, leaving the house chores half done. Wonder what she's up to. It sounded like she was talking to someone she had been with since morning. Hearing the harsh conversation, I couldn't help but grimace. My sister-in-law continued, What, she's dead? That would be something. But then again, I could skip the funeral and maybe go on a trip with Daniel. I mean, opportunities like these don't come around very often. My brother and I stared in disbelief. The person on the other end of the line was my sister-in-law's lover. Wouldn't it be nice if that really happened? Then I could make up some story about domestic abuse for my husband, get a big divorce settlement, and buy this house. Then Daniel and I can live here together. My sister-in-law continued her conversation. So, where do you want to go if we take that trip? I'm thinking. My brother abruptly interrupted. He stopped the video, his expression changing from his usual kind and gentle demeanor to one filled with anger. Lisa, I need your help. We're going to confront her. I nodded in agreement with my brother's words and immediately made a phone call. The next day, my brother called while I was at home. Lisa, she's back. Can you come over? He asked urgently. Of course, I'm on my way, I replied, rushing over to my brother's house. As I arrived, my sister-in-law came out to greet me with a forced smile. Well, hello there, Lisa. What brings you here on such short notice? You really should have let me know you were coming, she said, looking slightly annoyed. Andrew called me here. Please come this way, my brother interjected, leading us inside the house filled with the scent of incense. We all sat down at the dining table. What's going on, you two? It sounds serious, I said. I do feel bad about missing the funeral, I addressed my sister-in-law, Stephanie, in my usual tone. But ever since you moved in, you've been treating our mother like a servant, haven't you? And even though she was sick, you made her pay $20,000 for the new house. Huh? What are you talking about? I did all the housework. Are you trying to start a fight? Stephanie retorted defensively. Actually, everything has been recorded. I'm not actually an accountant. I'm a private investigator, I revealed. My brother was the only one who knew. I pointed to the surveillance camera embedded in the living room clock and showed her my phone. The video of my mother doing housework under my sister-in-law's command was on the screen. What? This is a violation of my privacy. What were you thinking? Delete it now. Stephanie raised her voice, clearly alarmed. I installed it. As the owner of this house, I have the right to do so. It's not a violation of privacy, my brother calmly responded. What's going on with you two? And what do you mean by private investigator? Stephanie froze, realizing something was amiss. My brother silently got on his phone, and the audio of Stephanie's phone call began to play. I might just skip the funeral and go on a trip with Daniel, and maybe make up a story about domestic abuse from my husband for a big divorce settlement. As the recording played, Stephanie's face went pale. Now this isn't what it seems. Please, hear me out, she pleaded. What's the difference? Tell me, my brother demanded. Caught off guard, Stephanie began to make awkward excuses. Well, he's just a friend. We were joking around. I didn't cheat. There's no evidence, right? But there is, I said, spreading out several pictures on the table. Images of Stephanie coming out from a nearby resort with a man, being intimate in their car, and even entering a hotel on their way back, clear evidence of cheating. What? What's this? How did you get these? Stephanie's voice trembled. You mentioned it over the phone, didn't you? You talked about where you wanted to go on your trip and how you planned to spend the night together with him. I had someone from our company take these photos, my brother explained. How could you do such a thing during our mother's funeral? I calmly spoke. Oh, enough. What's wrong with you all? Stephanie burst out. There's no way we can stay married after this, Stephanie. We're getting a divorce, my brother declared. But I'm going to demand plenty of alimony, and you're going to have to move out of this house, Stephanie countered. Excuse me? My brother and I exchanged a glance, stunned by her audacity. I mean, when people get divorced, the wife receives alimony, right? Now, hurry up and give me my money, Stephanie demanded. Actually, that's not true. Since you cheated, you're the guilty party, and you're the one who will have to pay compensation to my brother, I intervened. What? Clearly, you're even more foolish than I thought. Pitiful, just as Lisa said. I'm going to demand alimony from you and from your lover as well, my brother added. What? And besides, it's for me to tell you to leave. Don't ever come back, Stephanie retorted, growing more agitated. No, this must be a lie, Stephanie muttered as I handed her a return suitcase and escorted her to the entrance. After closing the door, I gently patted my downcast brother's shoulder. 6 months later, my brother's divorce from Stephanie was finalized. She tried to take it to mediation, but the evidence my brother had gathered made it clear to the mediators who the guilty party was. It turned out that Stephanie had been squandering the money from their joint bank account. So my brother was able to divorce her with almost no division of assets. After that, just as he had declared, my brother claimed alimony from Stephanie and her lover. The lover, who had planned on moving in with Stephanie using the alimony from my brother, was outraged by the alimony claim and immediately broke things off with Stephanie. Having nowhere to live and being dumped by her lover, my former sister-in-law is now said to be living alone in an old apartment, working part-time. My brother went through a period of depression. He eventually sold the house, stating that he was done with marriage. Now he lives alone. Seeing my brother looking so lonely, I've been considering introducing him to a kind woman I recently met through work. She's also a divorcee, so they might be able to relate to each other easily. With those thoughts in mind, I head out and work hard again today.
My name is Lisa, and I once believed my life was perfectly in order. I held a prestigious role as the head of marketing, shared a loving relationship with my husband, Ethan, and enjoyed the comfort of financial independence. Paying our mortgage on my own filled me with pride, adding to my sense of accomplishment. Family was central to our lives, with Ethan's younger brother, Brian, and their mother, Amy, as constant presences. After losing their father years earlier, the brothers' unwavering devotion to their mother was something I deeply admired. It was heartwarming and made me appreciate Ethan's dedication even more. Amy seemed to accept me at first. During family gatherings, she would chat with me about my work, often remarking with a nod, "Marketing, huh? Sounds important." Her comments reassured me that I was valued, and I felt welcome in Ethan's close-knit family. The early years of our marriage were filled with joyful weekends, festive holiday meals, and lively game nights. I fondly remember one Thanksgiving at Amy's house, where laughter and chatter filled the air, making me feel like I truly belonged. But everything began to change during a New Year's Eve party. While refilling my wine glass in the kitchen, I overheard Amy mocking Julie, a single mother struggling to make ends meet, commenting on her inexpensive dress and implying she didn't belong. The words stung, not because they were directed at me, but because they revealed a side of Amy I hadn't seen before. What I once dismissed as harmless teasing now seemed cruel. As time went on, these snide remarks became more frequent. Amy would huddle with Ethan and Brian, whispering and laughing at others' expense. It was uncomfortable to witness, and I found myself questioning the family dynamics I had once admired. The breaking point came one Easter Sunday when Amy openly criticized a relative's financial decisions in front of everyone. Unable to hold back, I stood up and confronted her, calling out the rudeness of her remarks. The room fell silent. Amy, dripping with sarcasm, dismissed my concerns, saying I was too sensitive. I turned to Ethan for support, but he stayed quiet, his eyes avoiding mine. After that, family gatherings became unbearable. I often found myself alone, sipping my drink, while Ethan stayed by his mother's side. Occasionally, He'd glance at me with an apologetic look, but he never stood up for me. One evening, after yet another tense dinner, I confronted him. "Why can't you ever stand up to her?" I asked, my frustration spilling over. Ethan sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "She's my mother, Lisa. What do you expect me to do?" "I expect you to tell her she's being cruel. I expect you to stand by me," I said firmly, but he never did. Eventually, I started avoiding family events, coming up with excuses, work emergencies, migraines, anything to escape the judgment and cold stares. Just as I thought things couldn't get more strained, life took an unexpected turn. I was pregnant. When I saw the 2 lines on the test, my hands trembled. I called for Ethan, who rushed in, concern etched on his face. When I showed him the test, his reaction, a mixture of shock and tentative relief, gave me a fleeting hope that this baby might heal the growing rift between us. The pregnancy, however, was far from easy. I suffered constant nausea and dizziness, with the looming threat of miscarriage hanging over me. My health deteriorated to the point where I had to quit my job and go on bed rest. A rare complication caused my eyesight to worsen, potentially permanently. Through it all, Ethan seemed to drift further away. He came home late, or not at all, leaving me to face these challenges alone. The day of my C-section arrived sooner than expected due to my worsening vision, which made natural birth too risky. Lying on the operating table, I was consumed by a swirl of fear and anticipation, unsure if this new chapter would bring healing or only deepen the cracks in our lives. When I asked for Ethan after the surgery, the nurse informed me he had chosen to wait outside. The procedure itself went smoothly, and hearing my son's first cries was a transcendent moment. My heart overflowed with love and awe at this new life, but the joy was short-lived. Ethan eventually appeared in the recovery room, his expression clouded with discomfort and irritation. "Lisa, we need to talk. This isn't right," he said abruptly, his words cutting through my fragile state. He criticized the necessity of my surgery, dismissing it as unnecessary, and lamented that men shouldn't be present during childbirth, as it went against some outdated norm. His words struck a painful chord, leaving me stunned. Before I could respond, he stormed out, muttering that the hospital environment was too overwhelming for him. I lay there, reeling, not just from his words, but from the realization that the man I once loved deeply was no longer the partner I needed. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings. Ethan's presence became increasingly rare, and when he was around, his lack of support was glaring. One night, as our baby cried inconsolably, Ethan groaned from the bedroom. "Can you shut him up?" he growled. "I'm trying," I replied, exhaustion thick in my voice. "He's teething. It hurts him." Ethan's patience was non-existent. "All you do is focus on the kid. What about me? What about our sex life?" I was floored by his insensitivity, still recovering from major surgery and running on fumes. His complaints felt like a cruel reminder of how far we had drifted apart. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan's dissatisfaction only grew. One evening, while I was soothing our 7-month-old, he announced, "You need to go back to work." I stared at him, shocked. "But the baby? We'll hire a nanny," he interrupted sharply. "We can't keep living like this. We need the money." Though I wanted to argue that our son needed me, and I wasn't ready to leave him, the cold resolve in Ethan's eyes silenced me. With a heavy heart, I began job hunting. Finding work with my compromised vision was challenging, but eventually, I secured a position at a smaller company, though the pay was far less than before. When I shared the news with Ethan, his reaction was predictably dismissive. "That's it?" he scoffed. "We're paying a nanny for this?" Tears stung my eyes. "I'm doing my best, Ethan. It's not easy with my eyesight," I pleaded. "Excuses," he muttered before walking away, leaving me crushed and alone in my efforts. This became my new reality. Mornings were a frantic rush to work, guilt gnawing at me as I left my son with the nanny. My days were a struggle, navigating my job with limited vision, and my evenings were a constant battle for my son's attention amidst Ethan's growing resentment. Time blurred together, days turned into weeks, and weeks into years. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed since my son's birth, each one marked by the strain of work, motherhood, and an ever-widening chasm between Ethan and me. I cherished my son deeply and found immense joy in witnessing his milestones. Yet, family gatherings remained a source of stress, especially due to Amy's behavior. She would play the role of the doting grandmother when others were around, but her disinterest was unmistakable. "Come to Grandma," she cooed in a syrupy voice, arms outstretched toward my son. Yet he clung to me, turning his face away from the woman he barely knew. Amy's expression soured, and her voice grew sharp. "What have you been telling him about me?" she accused. "You're turning my grandson against me." I sighed, weary. "He just doesn't know you well, Amy. If you visited more often, don't you dare blame this on me," she snapped, cutting me off before storming out to complain to Ethan. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, my world tilted again. Holding a pregnancy test in my trembling hands, I stared at the positive result. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. My first pregnancy had been so fraught, my health so compromised. Could my body handle another? As I pieced together the timeline, it dawned on me that I was already well into my first trimester. The decision, it seemed, had been made without my full awareness. With shaking hands, I dialed Ethan at work. "What is it?" he asked, his tone impatient. "Ethan, I began, my voice faltering. There was a pause before he replied dismissively. "Look, Lisa, I'm busy, we'll talk later. Just don't quit your job, okay? We can't afford that." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone, feeling lonelier than ever. Thankfully, this pregnancy proved less arduous than my first. The morning sickness was manageable, and my vision remained stable, allowing me to continue working. I was determined to support my growing family. Yet, as my belly grew, the distance between Ethan and me seemed to grow even more. He spent increasing amounts of time at his mother's house, often returning home late. One evening, exhausted from managing our toddler and my pregnancy, I mustered the courage to ask Ethan for help. As he walked through the door, I said, "Hey, can you read him a story? I'm so tired." Ethan glanced at us, then at his watch. "Can't. I promised Mom I'd help move some furniture. Don't wait up." And with that, he was gone, leaving me alone with our son and my tears. By the 7th month of my pregnancy, Thanksgiving was upon us. I busied myself with preparations, and soon, guests began to arrive. My parents pitched in immediately, filling the house with warmth and the comforting buzz of chatter and laughter. Just before dinner, the doorbell rang again. It was Brian, Ethan's younger brother, and he wasn't alone. "Everyone, this is Christine," Brian announced, introducing his fiancée. The room's mood shifted to joyous congratulations. Amy arrived shortly after, her eyes lighting up at the sight of Christine. Throughout dinner, Amy lavished Christine with attention, peppering her with questions about her job. "A manager at a national bank? How prestigious," Amy gushed, clearly impressed. Then, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, Amy said, "Christine here makes $220,000 a year. Now that's the kind of daughter-in-law I've always dreamed of. Smart, beautiful, successful." Her words hit me like a slap, especially when she threw a pointed look my way and added, "Unlike some people, who can only pop out babies and breed poverty." The sting of her words cut deep, but I swallowed my pain, determined not to let her see me falter. I felt my cheeks flush with humiliation. My mother, sitting beside me, bristled, ready to defend me, but I gently placed a hand on her arm, silently urging her not to escalate the situation. Amy, sensing her advantage, continued with her voice dripping in faux sweetness. "You know," she said, looking around the room, "why don't we continue this lovely evening at that new restaurant downtown? My treat, of course." Before I could process what was happening, Amy, Ethan, Brian, and Christine were heading out the door. Ethan didn't even glance back. The festive spirit drained from the room, and soon, one by one, the other guests began to leave, offering polite but thin excuses. Only my parents stayed behind, their presence a silent show of support, yet I declined their offers to help clean up, insisting they needed to rest. After they left, I sank onto the couch, my tears falling unchecked. The silence of the house was deafening, broken only by my sobs. My hand rested on my growing belly as I grappled with the overwhelming reality of how my life had spiraled to this point. Hours passed. The sky began to lighten when I heard the front door creak open. Ethan stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and cigarette smoke. He didn't say a word, heading straight to the bedroom without so much as a glance in my direction. Shaking, I picked up my phone and mindlessly scrolled through social media, and there it was, photos of Amy, Ethan, Brian, and Christine at an upscale nightclub. They were all smiles, the caption cutting like a knife, "Best Thanksgiving ever with my real family." As my due date approached, a mix of excitement and dread weighed heavily on me. The doctors had scheduled another C-section due to the short interval since my last. I tried to focus on the arrival of our baby, but Ethan's growing distance loomed like a dark shadow over my thoughts. One cold winter afternoon, I noticed Ethan unpacking bags full of summer clothes. Confused, I asked, "What's all this?" "Just saw a good sale," he replied casually, avoiding my gaze. "Thought I'd update my wardrobe." Something didn't sit right, but with the baby's arrival so close, I pushed my suspicions aside. I had been diligently saving to cover the mortgage, bills, and even a babysitter for our 4-year-old. Thankfully, my workplace had approved 3 months of unpaid leave, but the weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. Then, just 5 days before my scheduled C-section, chaos erupted. I was resting when Ethan and Amy burst through the door, urgency written across their faces. Following them to our bedroom, I watched in shock as Ethan hurriedly packed the new clothes. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice rising with panic. "We're all going to Brian's wedding in Hawaii," Ethan replied curtly, tossing shirts into a suitcase. My heart pounded. "But my C-section is in 5 days. Who's going to take care of our son?" "You'll manage. You always do," Ethan said coldly, zipping up his suitcase with finality. Before I could argue further, Ethan and Amy were out the door, leaving me standing there, stunned and breathless. Reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. Frantic, I checked our joint account, and my heart sank. It was empty. Every dollar I had saved was gone. With trembling fingers, I called Ethan. He finally answered, snapping, "What?" "The money, Ethan. All our savings. Where is it?" I stammered, my voice barely steady. There was a pause before his cold laughter rang out. "We needed it for Brian's wedding gift. Don't be so greedy, Lisa." Then the line went dead. Before I could process his words, a sharp pain tore through my abdomen. Looking down, I saw a puddle forming at my feet. My water had broken. Panic gripped me as I realized the imminent danger. My previous C-section scar put me at high risk. Clutching my phone with one hand and my belly with the other, I dialed emergency services. The hospital was a blur of doctors shouting and machines beeping. Hours later, I woke to the rhythmic sound of monitors and my mother's tear-streaked face hovering over me. "Lisa," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "You're okay. The baby's okay." Slowly, the gravity of what had happened set in. I had almost lost my life, and my baby. 5 days after the emergency C-section, I was recovering faster than expected. The doctors were impressed, and I was cleared to go home. Yet during that time, Ethan didn't call, not once, not to check if I was alive, not to ask about his newborn son. That's when I knew our marriage was over. I reached out to my parents, asking if I could stay with them. They welcomed me and my boys without hesitation, providing not just a home but the emotional support I desperately needed. While they doted on their grandsons, I began resting and researching divorce lawyers, quietly gathering the necessary financial documents. A week after I left the hospital, Ethan finally called. I ignored the first 5 calls but answered on the 6th. "Where the hell are you? Why aren't you at home?" he demanded, his tone laced with anger and confusion. Calmly, I replied, "I'm at my parents' house with our sons. I've filed for divorce." His reaction was a mix of disbelief and mockery. "Divorce? Are you kidding me? After everything I've done for you?" He laughed bitterly. "Everything you've done?" I snapped. "Like abandoning me before I gave birth? Like stealing our savings?" "Oh, get over it," he scoffed. "I'll pay you back. Besides, I don't even want to see you again. You know why? Because I'm going to be rich." He rambled on about a job offer from Brian's new wife, Christine, who had promised to make him wealthy through some financial venture. "You never believed in me, Lisa," he spat. "You always held me back. Well, guess what? I'm free now. And you're just a loser who can't see potential when it's right in front of her." The divorce was swift. Ethan didn't contest much. He returned the money he had taken and was ordered to pay alimony. Since I had been solely responsible for the mortgage payments, the judge awarded me the house. The day I returned to what was now solely my home, Ethan was packing his belongings. As I entered with my toddler and newborn, he sneered. "Enjoy this dump while you can," he jeered. "I'll be in a mansion soon, swimming in cash. You'll see what you missed out on." As he left, a profound sense of relief washed over me. The house felt brighter, freer, finally rid of his shadow. A year and a half later, life had settled into a steady rhythm. I balanced work and motherhood. It wasn't always easy, but we were happy, healthy, and thriving. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, a news alert flashed on my phone. My jaw dropped as I read the headline, "Local banker exposed as fraud leaves family in ruins." Christine, the so-called financial genius, had orchestrated an elaborate scam. She had convinced Ethan, Brian, and Amy to invest in a non-existent company, even taking out massive loans to fund Brian and Christine's extravagant Hawaii wedding, the very event Ethan had abandoned me for. Christine wasn't a banker at all. The office she had shown them was a short-term rental, part of her elaborate con. She vanished with millions, leaving behind nothing but forged documents and shattered dreams. Ethan and Brian were left destitute, their debts unmanageable. Amy lost her home, her car, and even basic belongings. Through the grapevine, I learned she had taken a cashier's job, struggling to afford rent and groceries. Then my phone rang. It was Amy. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Lisa," she began timidly, her usual commanding tone gone. "We need your help. The children need their father and grandmother. You can't turn your back on family in times like this." I took a deep breath, memories flooding back, being humiliated, left alone while pregnant, my savings stolen. "Family?" I replied firmly. "You weren't concerned about family when you left me pregnant and in danger. You weren't concerned about family when you helped steal my savings. You weren't concerned about family when you belittled me." Amy tried to interrupt, but I pressed on. "I'm sorry for what you're going through, but I'm not responsible for the choices you, Ethan, and Brian made. My priority is my children, and I won't expose them to the instability you've brought upon yourselves. Please, don't contact me again." I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. As I set the phone down, a weight lifted from my shoulders. It was finally, truly over.
My name is Emma, and for most of my life, I believed that if you worked hard and treated people well, everything would turn out all right. I'd spent over a decade building a stable career in financial analysis, carefully climbing up the ranks. I lived in a modest but comfortable 2-bedroom condo in Chicago, which I'd saved for over the years. Life felt stable, and for a while, I thought I had everything I needed. But there was one thing missing. I'd always hoped to share my life with someone who truly understood and appreciated me. I wanted a partner, someone who respected my independence and ambitions. So when I met Tom, I thought I finally found that. Tom was charming and intelligent, and we connected on so many levels. We shared the same values, or so I thought, and he seemed to genuinely respect my independence. I've been so careful in choosing who I let into my life, and Tom felt like a safe bet. I truly believed he'd be different from other men who felt threatened by my independence. After dating for a while, Tom introduced me to his family. His mother, Alice, was a retired school principal. She was 65 but looked younger, with a sharp gaze that seemed to cut through the air around her. Alice was one of those people who walked into a room and instantly took control of it. From what Tom had told me, she'd been a single mother most of his life and was fiercely proud of him. When I met her, I tried my best to make a good impression, and for a brief moment I thought I had. She was polite, but there was a certain edge to her that made me feel like I was being analyzed with every word I said. Tom and I got engaged within a year. I was thrilled, thinking this was the start of a new chapter. I remember feeling incredibly lucky that I found a man who supported my career and seemed to appreciate the life I'd built on my own. But as the wedding day approached, Alice became more present in our lives. She'd offer unsolicited advice on everything from the wedding colors to the guest list, often implying that her way of doing things was simply better. Tom would shrug it off, saying it was just her personality, but something about her constant interference gnawed at me. On our wedding day, as I walked down the aisle, I caught Alice's eyes watching me. There was something unsettling in her expression, a sort of critical judgment I couldn't shake, but I brushed it off, telling myself I was just nervous. After all, this was the happiest day of my life, right? After we got married, Tom and I decided to move into my condo temporarily, planning to buy a larger home together. It felt exciting to have a shared dream. But that's when Alice started showing up, often without notice. She'd comment on my choice of decor, my cooking, or even the layout of the condo. At first, I brushed it off, trying to keep the peace. Maybe she was just trying to help, I told myself. One evening, Tom and I were having dinner when Alice showed up with a bottle of wine and a strange suggestion. "Why don't you two move into a house closer to me?" she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That way, I can help out more, especially once the grandkids come along. I felt uneasy, but Tom seemed to like the idea. He assured me it was just temporary, that it would be nice to have some help nearby, and I reluctantly agreed to start looking at homes in her neighborhood. We found a beautiful, spacious house that was, admittedly, closer to Alice's than I would have liked. But Tom was thrilled, so I told myself it would be worth it. We moved in, and for a while, things seemed alright. But then Alice began asserting herself even more. She dropped by frequently, often with bags of groceries or other things she thought we needed, and give unsolicited advice on everything. She'd rearrange the kitchen cupboards, comment on my wardrobe choices, and even rearrange our living room furniture while I was at work. When I mentioned this to Tom, he'd just laugh, saying, "You know how moms are." Months passed, and I felt increasingly uncomfortable in my own home. Then, one evening, I got news that would change everything. I was pregnant. I was overjoyed. I thought this would bring our family closer and that perhaps Alice's involvement would now have a purpose. But when we shared the news with her, her reaction was strange. Instead of excitement, she looked at me with a critical gaze and said, "Well, I hope you're ready for the responsibility. It's not just about you anymore." As my pregnancy progressed, Alice's helpfulness turned into control. She began coming over almost daily, reorganizing things, making lists of what a proper mother should do, and offering her expert advice on everything. She questioned what I ate, comment on my prenatal appointments, and make snide remarks about my choices. I began feeling like a guest in my own life. Things reached a breaking point one afternoon. I came home to find Alice going through my personal papers in our bedroom. When I confronted her, she calmly explained that she was just checking to make sure everything was organized for the baby. My privacy had been violated and I felt furious. I tried talking to Tom, but he brushed it off saying, "She just wants to help." I was heartbroken. The man I married was supposed to support me, but it felt like he was choosing his mother over me. I felt isolated and began questioning my entire relationship. One night, just as I was entering my third trimester, I came home from a long day at work. The house was dark, which was unusual because Tom was usually home by then. I tried the door, but it was locked. After knocking, Alice opened it, her expression cold and unwelcoming. "Emma," she said, "we need to talk." She led me into the living room, where Tom was sitting, looking down, avoiding my gaze. My heart pounded as I sat across from them, feeling a sense of dread. Alice looked at me with a steely expression and said, "We believe it's best if you transfer ownership of the house to Tom. It's for the security of the family, after all. You'll be focusing on the baby soon, and this way, Tom will be able to handle everything." I was stunned. "This is our home," I said, my voice shaking. "I've invested just as much as Tom has. This is supposed to be a partnership." But Alice was relentless. She looked at me with an icy gaze and said, "If you truly cared about this family, you'd do what's best for it. Holding onto the house in your name shows a lack of trust." She went on, implying that I was selfish for not prioritizing Tom's security. Tom remained silent, his eyes on the floor. I felt a sense of betrayal that I couldn't put into words. This was supposed to be the man I loved, the man that promised to be my partner. And yet, here he was, letting his mother push me around. I told them both that I needed time to think and went to bed, feeling alone and heartbroken. The next morning, things got even worse. As I was getting ready for work, Alice cornered me, again pressing the issue of the house. I firmly told her that I wouldn't be signing anything over and that we'd bought the house as partners. She glared at me, a look that sent a chill down my spine. "You're making a big mistake, Emma," she said, her voice low and dangerous. That night, I came home to find my belongings packed in boxes. Alice stood there, smugly informing me that Tom had agreed I should leave until I was ready to put the family first. I couldn't believe it. They were throwing me out of my own home, the place I'd worked so hard to build with Tom. I was devastated, but I knew I couldn't stay where I wasn't wanted. I spent the next few days staying with a close friend, trying to make sense of everything. I wanted to cry, but more than that, I felt anger building inside me. How had I let myself get so trapped? But as the initial shock wore off, I began to feel a new sense of clarity. I realized that I had to take control of my life. I wasn't going to let Alice or anyone else manipulate me. With the help of my friend Leah, who was also a lawyer, I started gathering evidence of Alice's behavior and Tom's complicity. I documented every instance of manipulation and harassment, determined to protect what was mine. Leah helped me file for divorce, and we prepared for the court battle that lay ahead. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom with Leah by my side. Tom and Alice were there, both looking smug, as if they'd already won. But I was determined to fight for myself and my future. As Leah presented our case, detailing the emotional abuse and manipulation I'd endured, I watched the judge's expression shift from neutral to one of concern. When it was my turn to speak, I recounted everything I'd been through, describing how Alice had tried to control every aspect of my life and how Tom had chosen his mother over me. I told the court that I was standing up not just for myself, but for every person who had ever been manipulated or controlled by someone else. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. I was awarded full ownership of the house and a significant portion of our shared assets. Tom and Alice were left stunned, their smug expressions replaced by shock and disbelief. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had taken back control of my life, and I knew I'd never let anyone make me feel powerless again. This experience had been painful, but it had also made me stronger. And as I looked ahead, I felt ready to face whatever challenges life might bring my way.
Everyone aspires to be the best at something, but when this confidence transforms into taking others for granted, the universe might deliver a lesson. Understanding that there's always someone better out there is the key to humility, which is what truly defines the strongest individuals. My name is Mina, and I've been married to my husband Thomas for 2 years. When we decided to tie the knot, Thomas warned me about his troublesome sister, suggesting she might become a burden. As an only child, the prospect of having a sister excited me. But Thomas's words also sparked anxiety and curiosity about the kind of trouble she could bring. Now, 2 years into our marriage, I fully comprehend and have experienced what Thomas meant. I was born into a relatively wealthy family where my father runs a mid-sized trading company. He is well-informed and progressive in his thinking. My parents always respected my decisions, creating an environment where I could freely explore my interests. The 2008 Lehman Brothers collapse, when I was just an 11-year-old elementary school student, intrigued me. Witnessing the significant impact it had on the world and Japan, I became fascinated by how a disruption in the flow of funds could cause a global panic. This sparked my interest in researching financial circulation. Naturally curious and apparently quite intelligent, my parents had me take an IQ test, and the results exceeded the normal range. As I delved into this newfound interest, many aspects became clear, but my curiosity never waned throughout middle and high school. Continuing my exploration of this topic, I pursued a major in college that allowed me to deepen my understanding. As I delved further, my eagerness to apply my knowledge led me to venture into day trading, encouraged by my professor, who highlighted day trading as an excellent way to experience capital flow firsthand. I embraced the challenge, aware of the need for careful management to avoid debt. My research efforts were extensive as I identified statistically favorable stocks for day trading. Armed with a modest sum from all the allowances I had saved up, I engaged in buying and selling the same stock within the same day, with the goal of capitalizing on quick results. My predictions proved accurate, and though the initial increase was modest, I steadily grew my funds by repeating this process and gradually increasing my investment. In a year, I managed to amplify the initial amount by more than 50 times. While the sum may not have been significant on a larger scale, my primary concern wasn't about the magnitude of the achievement. What mattered most to me was whether the answers I had derived from my research were correct. During my university seminar, I encountered a student named Thomas, known for his analytical skills. Our shared perspectives on various topics drew us close, and after graduation, despite my initial plan to join my father's company, Thomas proposed an alternative path. He identified a job at a foreign investment firm, a proposition he presented on the day of our graduation ceremony. Following a celebration, Thomas confessed his feelings, and without hesitation, I said yes. His intelligence had always been a source of comfort, and his understanding nature made me feel at ease. As we both embarked on new journeys, gaining experience, our relationship continued to strengthen. Inspired by the concept of trade at my father's company, I dedicated myself to researching foreign companies to gain an advantage in negotiations and established a robust foundation for our deals. Thomas, with his inherent analytical skills, excelled in identifying profitable investment opportunities, earning high praise within his company. Despite our busy schedules, we maintained our connection through dates that provided refreshing breaks before diving back into our respective work. Over the 5 years of our relationship, we became indispensable to each other, evolving into a reliable support system. Deeply immersed in our exciting careers, we decided it was the right time to take the next step. Thomas proposed, expressing his desire to spend the rest of his life with me. Without hesitation, I accepted his proposal, eager to begin our life together. However, when it was time for a family meeting, Thomas disclosed something important about his sister, Alice. According to Thomas, Alice, his sister 2 years younger, was known for being challenging. He cautioned that she might cause some discomfort or inconvenience. Alice, exceptionally bright from a young age, developed a competitive spirit, looking down on others, including Thomas, whom she considered inferior. Even though Thomas was regarded as a prodigy, Alice claimed superiority, joining a rival investment and consulting firm to compete with him in her career. Thomas was worried that his engagement might affect Alice's pride, as she always sought to prove herself superior. Having no close friends and seemingly without a significant other, Alice appeared to harbor insecurities, masked by a brave face. Thomas was concerned about how she might react, fearing that she would intensify her efforts to demonstrate her strength in the face of our engagement. Attempting to reassure Thomas with a light-hearted "it's okay" proved ineffective, as his worry seemed unending. This only heightened my curiosity about his intense sister, Alice. Finally meeting her at a family gathering, her sharp, intelligent beauty was unmistakable, though a certain coldness lingered. Whether that was intrinsic to her nature or a result of my preconceived notions, I couldn't discern. Thomas's parents, in contrast, were kind and humorous, putting me at ease about getting along with them. However, beyond the initial greeting, Alice remained silent, merely eating her meal while scrutinizing me as if assessing my worth. After the meeting, as everyone was leaving, Alice pulled me aside. Curious about the person I would be, she expressed disappointment, dismissing me as just a girl who secured a job at her parents' company and likely slacking off. She asserted her financial prowess, claiming to move large amounts of money and make significant profits, placing herself on a level far superior to mine. According to Alice, Thomas settling for someone like me was disappointing, and she concluded by stating that today's gain was realizing how much I fell short of her standards. Stunned and unsure how to respond, Alice left the room, leaving me there. Thomas returned, noticing I hadn't left with Alice. Concerned, he asked if something had happened. In response to Alice's jab, I laughed it off, assuring Thomas that it was just a minor comment. Thomas apologized for his sister's rudeness, but I reassured him that I wasn't bothered. It didn't hurt, but I couldn't help but wonder what would happen the next time we met, particularly at the wedding. Strangely, I found myself looking forward to it, anticipating the interesting dynamics that might unfold. Surprised by my response, Thomas and I went on to have a grand wedding attended by family, friends, and colleagues from both sides. We pledged our eternal love and reveled in the joyous occasion, but Alice appeared grumpy and irritated right from the start. Thomas had mentioned that Alice had neither friends nor a romantic partner, so I could somewhat understand her feelings, finding it slightly amusing. During a break for a wardrobe change, as I waited for the staff to assist me, Alice entered seemingly without reason. She remarked that my happiness was only for the day and predicted that, as a plain woman, I wouldn't get the spotlight after the wedding, insinuating that I would just leech off Thomas' earnings. Unfazed, I couldn't comprehend how anyone could be satisfied with that. She declared her intentions to climb even higher on her own and find someone better than Thomas for an even grander wedding. With that rapid-fire monologue, a self-satisfied Alice left without giving me a chance to respond. As the staff walked in just after Alice's departure, I burst into laughter at the timing. Apologizing to the puzzled staff, I started changing, realizing that Alice knew how to keep things interesting. Since the wedding, I had no contact with her. I anticipated seeing her again, perhaps at Christmas when visiting my in-laws, but an unexpected connection with Alice arose sooner than expected. My father decided to seek external consulting for asset preservation and expansion at his company. Although I offered to handle it, he insisted on bringing in outside expertise, choosing a specific firm. Upon hearing the familiar name of the consulting firm during negotiations at my father's company, a sense of recognition washed over me, but I couldn't immediately place it. To my surprise, Alice was among the representatives of the firm, and the realization dawned that it was her company. We exchanged surprised glances, but silently agreed to act as if we were meeting for the first time, keeping our sister-in-law relationship a secret from the other team members. When I discussed the situation with Thomas at home, he already knew about it, expressing frustration. He suggested I step away from the project, but I found the situation amusing and laughed it off. Despite my amusement, I had to maintain professionalism during the negotiations. I pointed out flaws and inadequacies in their proposals, supported by logical reasoning that unsettled them. Alice tried to counter with past examples and mathematical evidence, but my responses exposed their weak points, leaving them silent. The meeting ended in my favor, with the other team agreeing to come up with a second proposal for the next meeting. As I relaxed with coffee after they left, I received a phone call meant for me. Answering the phone, it was Alice. She acknowledged my success, but declared that someone as excellent as her couldn't be bested by me. With a parting shot about not needing guidance from someone like me, she hung up. Bursting into laughter, I held the phone, drawing curious glances from nearby colleagues. From that point on, I took full control of the meetings, with their team often scrambling to respond to my points. Alice attempted comebacks but consistently fell short, her frustration visible. When I shared this with Thomas, he revealed that Alice had never been outdone by anyone before. Additionally, he mentioned that Alice had recently faced rejection from a guy she liked, compounding her irritation. I couldn't help but let out a surprised "huh" and stifle my laughter as a consulting project finally concluded successfully. The opposing team leader thanked us, expressing that they had learned a lot. And as everyone dispersed, Alice and I found ourselves alone. Alice, however, was not satisfied with the outcome. "I'm not satisfied with how things went. I'll make sure to get the better of you next time. Just so you know, I am more excellent. I even bought a tower mansion at my age. Only someone as outstanding as me could afford a brand new tower mansion," Alice declared, emphasizing her success as an investor. With that statement, Alice left, and Thomas later confirmed that what she said was true. Alice had indeed found success as an investor and recently bought a tower mansion to live on her own. While acknowledging her undeniable talent and the achievement within her reach, I genuinely wanted to congratulate her. A few days later, on the weekend, I had some business at a tower mansion. As I stopped at a certain mid-level floor, a door opened, and a resident stepped out. The resident and I locked eyes and both exclaimed in surprise. It was Alice. "Why are you here? If you're not invited to the party, did you come to clean?" I questioned. It seemed that today was the day of Alice's celebrity home party, as she had mentioned. "Not at all. I'm here to deliver something to an acquaintance on this floor." "You have an acquaintance here, and you came down from where?" Alice replied. "Well, my home is on the top floor of this mansion. Naturally, I had to come down." I countered, reminding her that she and Thomas lived in a single-story house because Thomas couldn't handle heights. Alice revealed that the tower mansion was her office and workshop. As we argued loudly in the hallway, a voice behind us asked, "Alice, what's going on?" Alice turned and said, "Sorry, senior." The woman who had spoken and 3 other women looked at us with concern. "I apologize for not greeting you downstairs. I was just dealing with..." Alice seemed at a loss for words. The woman Alice called senior looked at me, searching her memory, and exclaimed in surprise, "Aren't you Maya?" Alice was visibly confused. The senior explained, "Don't you know? This is Mrs. Mia, our new external board director starting this month. She's also known as the investment goddess whom Alice admires." Alice was speechless at this unexpected revelation, and the senior continued, "Also, she owns a significant share of your company, which made her a board director." Alice was overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events. The senior added, "Alice, while extremely talented, has a poor reputation regarding teamwork and attitude towards colleagues. If she can't improve, she can't continue working in her current role." Alice was already knocked out by the harsh reality, kneeling and collapsed on the floor. Later, Thomas told me that Alice, once a fierce wolf, had become a small dog. It seemed she finally understood that there's always someone above her. Reflecting on my previous attitude, I felt a bit guilty for finding it all so amusing. Alice has become a lesson for me to never underestimate anyone and to treat others with respect. Thomas apologized for not being more involved in these events, but it's not his responsibility at all. His concern showed his good nature, and I love him all the more for it. My current hope is to start a family with Thomas soon. I can't wait to enjoy life as a family of 3. If Alice changes her mindset and broadens her perspective, she'll surely find friends and a partner soon. One night, I had a dream of a family of 3. And by the end of next year, we'll be a family of 5, triplets from the Cabbage Patch. I woke up sweating but couldn't help laughing at the prospect.
One day, when I got home, I couldn't find my husband anywhere. He had left without telling me, and I couldn't find any clues about where he went. A few days later, I discovered that he and my sister had run away together to get married. That was 12 years ago. Recently, he called me and said he was coming back home with my sister, his wife now, and that I should leave his parents' house. He was upset that I was living there. It's been 12 years since they ran away, and it seems like he wants to make my sister his wife officially now that things have calmed down. But they don't know. They don't realize how much our family, including me, has changed since then. My name is Melanie Miller, and I'm 27 years old. I studied web design and worked at a company where I met my husband, Shane. Shane is a friendly guy who works in sales. We fell in love quickly and got married after a year of dating. After we got married, we moved in with his parents. I quit my job at the company and started working as a freelance web designer from home. I wanted to take care of our home and support my husband's lifestyle. At first, it was hard for me to find a steady job, so my income wasn't always reliable. But now things had changed. I was able to find work easily and make a steady income. I could work at my own pace and prioritize my family. I cherished the time I spent with my husband and his family in the mornings, evenings, and before bed. Life felt really good. But I started to notice a change in my husband's behavior. It began when I started making twice as much money as I did at my previous job just 2 months earlier. I was thrilled to have reached and exceeded my old salary. I couldn't wait to tell my husband when he got home from work. "Shane, guess what? Last month, I made twice as much as I used to at my old job." "What? Seriously? Your old job paid pretty well, didn't it?" "Yeah, but I've been wanting more." "I finally did it." "Yeah, sure, that's great. You want me to throw you a party?" My husband's response was unexpectedly sarcastic and negative. I couldn't understand why he was acting that way, so I asked, "Shane, are you upset with me about something? Did I do something wrong? I thought you'd be happy for me." "Why should I be happy? My salary didn't increase." "Well, yes, but can't you just be happy for me, your wife?" "Really? I'm not like you. I'm just not naturally happy." "Shane." After that argument, my husband started to withdraw more and more each day. Our talks became less frequent until I was the only one saying good morning and good night. Even though we had only been married for a year, it felt like we were far from happy. My in-laws, who we lived with, could sense the tension but never said anything. 2 months passed and nothing changed. We ate together in silence, and he always controlled the TV. When I was watching something, he would eat all the food I bought without asking. Whenever I tried to talk to him about it, he would argue, so I stopped bringing it up. One day, while I was cleaning the house, my mother-in-law approached me looking concerned. "Melanie, how are you feeling? Are you alright?" "What do you mean, am I alright?" "Well, when you and Shane first got married, you used to go out and have a good time together. But lately, it seems like you don't do that much anymore, and you hardly talk." "Yeah, but we've only been married for a year," I replied, trying to brush off her concern. I forced a smile to reassure her, but she could tell it wasn't genuine. She looked at me seriously. "If you don't want to talk about it, that's okay, but I worry about you. Lately, it seems like you've been feeling down." "Well, I'm not pretending to be okay. Your father has noticed it too. We're just concerned that you might be overwhelming yourself." "Oh, Mom." I couldn't deny that my husband's discomfort with my higher income might have been partly my fault. But at the same time, I felt alone in my achievement. When my mother finally acknowledged the pain I was feeling, it brought tears to my eyes. So I decided to open up to her completely. After hearing everything I had to say, she started to comfort me and said, "I'm so sorry. He's just not mature enough to be genuinely happy for your success." "No, it's my fault. I was selfish to expect him to be genuinely happy for me. But you shouldn't have to deal with this alone in a marriage, Melanie. Keeping your feelings bottled up will only make things worse." "I don't think it could get any worse." "Alright, so you and Shane really need to have a serious conversation about this. Can you do that?" "Yes, I can." "Thank you for confiding in me, honey." She smiled warmly at me. "Of course." Then she gave me a comforting pat on the head. My in-laws love me like their own daughter. They've been my support. Taking my mother-in-law's advice to heart, I decided to have a serious talk with my husband. That night, I stayed up late, waiting for him to come home. But as the hours passed, there was no sign of him. He usually got home by 10 at the latest, but it was already past 11, and he still hadn't returned. "Why are you taking so long?" I texted him, but he didn't respond. I started to worry that something might be wrong. I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up, and the phone just kept ringing. So I waited anxiously. Finally, around midnight, he walked in. "I've been trying to reach you," I began, but he just sighed loudly and looked annoyed. "What's going on? Why are you still up?" "Well, I wanted to talk to you about something important today." "About what?" he replied, sounding annoyed. "I think our issues started because of my new salary, right? I should have maybe kept that to myself. I know it might have hurt your pride." As soon as I said that, I felt a shiver down my spine. He was standing there, looking cold and distant. I was scared stiff. He responded with anger. "There's nothing to talk about, and it's pathetic that you're waiting up for me. I'm just trying to make things better between us, Shane. That's the problem. I obviously made a mistake in choosing the right partner." "No, I'm exhausted from working overtime. You don't have any right to speak, considering you just stay home all day." My husband stormed past me and headed upstairs to our room. I couldn't bring myself to move until I was sure he was upstairs. Why was he talking to me like that? All I wanted was a normal married life. My mother-in-law had encouraged me to talk to him, but it didn't solve anything. After his attitude, I didn't want to push for another conversation. It felt like he completely ignored me as a person, and it left me feeling bitter. 2 more months passed and still we didn't talk. The days seemed endless, slipping by in a blur. Then, one day, I came home to find my husband gone. I went into his room and something felt off. "Huh? Shane's room is never this tidy." Shane isn't exactly known for being neat, but his room was strangely clean. His clothes and suitcase were gone. It hit me then, he'd moved out. I tried calling my in-laws, but their phone was either off or disconnected. Just as I was panicking, my sister, Mimi, called me. "Hi sis, it's been a while." "Mimi, I can't talk right now." "Is he? Your husband isn't there, is he?" "What? How did you know?" "Something's not right," I said, feeling a sense of unease. "I'm with your husband right now." "What? What do you mean?" Well, I happened to be at the bar and I ran into him there. We had a drink and he mentioned that you two weren't really getting along. Mimi, no, you can't be serious. I am. I'm dating him now and we're planning to get married, so don't try to stop me. Going away. That's ridiculous. Bring Shane back home right now. I'm sorry I can't. I've actually had feelings for him for a while now. And he's tall and handsome. I'm taking him. Then she hung up. I tried calling her back many times, but she never answered. Instead, she sent me pictures. There were dozens of photos of them together, going on dates, smiling. It was really hard for me to see. A few days later, I received the completed divorce papers signed by Shane. When I called his workplace, they told me he had already quit. I knew I couldn't deal with this on my own anymore. I decided to tell my parents and in-laws about what was happening and ask for their support. So Shane and Mimi are together now. He left his job and wants me to sign the divorce papers, I explained. There was a stunned silence. Then my father-in-law spoke up after a moment. Melanie, I'm truly sorry for our son's foolishness. You don't have to forgive us, and you don't owe us anything. Oh, Father, I can't forgive your sister either. You're like a daughter to me. I can't forgive them for hurting my precious daughter. Everyone echoed his sentiment. In that moment, our feelings towards Shane and Mimi changed completely. My in-laws were already considering moving to a new house, and after this they said, we want nothing to do with our son anymore. And they moved without telling him. My parents also decided to cut ties with my sister. If she ever comes back, we'll act like we don't know her. Someone who would betray their own sister like that isn't our daughter, they said. So I decided to go back home to my parents. I asked for alimony from Shane as part of the divorce agreement. He replied, you'll get it when I get my divorce. Eventually, I received several million yen in alimony along with a message, divorce me. Once the divorce was finalized, I cut all ties with Shane and Mimi. It's been 12 years since then, and a lot has changed. My in-laws demolished the house we lived in and sold the land. I've become more successful as a web designer, and my income has grown significantly. Thanks to this, I can travel often with my parents and live a fulfilling life. Today, while I was working, I got a call. Without checking the caller ID, I answered, thinking it was a client. But instantly, it brought back unpleasant memories. It's been a while, Melanie. How have you been? Shane's voice echoed. I knew you recognized your ex-husband's voice, he chuckled. He's still spouting nonsense like before. What do you want? After 12 years, now you want to talk. I could hear him chuckle. No, you're in my house. Leave within the next 10 minutes. What? What are you talking about? We're facing some financial trouble anyway. I'm heading there now. I'm bringing my wife home to our house. You need to leave my parents' house now. It seems he still believes I'm living with his parents. He thinks that after 12 years, things have settled down and they'll finally be accepted. In the background, I hear my sister saying, that's right, get out of there. But they really have no idea. Do they really think that just because it's been 12 years, everything is forgiven? The world isn't that forgiving, and I won't make it easy for them. But I took a deep breath and replied, if you want to go home, go ahead. But I'm not at your parents' house anymore. Oh really? Did my dad kick you out? How clueless can you be? Your parents' house is gone, Shane. Huh? What do you mean it's gone? Shane's voice started shaking with anxiety. At that moment, he arrived where the house used to stand. He screamed, what the hell? And I could hear the pain in his voice. I continued, as soon as you ran away, we cut ties with both of you. Your parents moved out, and my parents completely disowned the woman you're with. There's nowhere for you to come back to. Are you serious? How is this even possible? Believe it or not, it's up to you, but neither your parents nor mine consider you family anymore. You've proven you're not worthy since you both destroy people's lives. That's awful. But who's to blame for ruining your family? Don't ever call me again. I won't let you ruin my life any more than you already have. With that, I hung up and blocked their number. This time, I cut the last tie. After their failed attempt to go to his parents' house, they tried to come to mine, but my parents have already disowned her. My sister was crying loudly, but my parents just asked, who are you? And ignored them at the gate. Then they both got down on their knees, begging, please forgive us. We have nowhere to go, please. Shane was pleading too. I'm begging you, my parents' house is gone. We have nowhere to go. Shut up, we don't care. "You're not family anymore," my parents said as they sprinkled salt on the front door. "No, please wait, no, please, I'm begging you," my father-in-law pleaded. "You don't get to call me that. Get out of here." They were so persistent that my father ended up sprinkling salt on them, and my mother called the cops for trespassing. They haven't been seen since. Last I heard, they were jobless, homeless, and asking their friends for money. But word got around about them, and no one was willing to help. And even if they returned to their hometown, they'd face the same fate. But they brought it on themselves. They made their bed, and now they have to lie in it. My parents and I will never see them again, and they'll spend the rest of their lives regretting their choices.
In the busy city of Sydney, Australia, where tall buildings sparkled in the sunlight and everything moved fast, Jasmine's days felt slow. At 25, Jasmine worked hard as a cleaner but struggled to get by. Her days were filled with the noise of cleaning tools and city traffic, but she stayed hopeful despite her tough life. Each day, she cleaned offices and hotels carefully, dreaming of a better life for herself and her family. One afternoon, while Jasmine was cleaning the floors of a fancy office building in Sydney's business district, a tall, well-dressed man named Liam caught her attention. Liam, 28 and wealthy, had been walking through the building's lobby and noticed Jasmine. He was intrigued not by her looks, but by how dedicated she was to her work. He admired her focus and the kindness she showed despite her situation. Feeling sympathetic, Liam walked up to Jasmine. "Excuse me," he said, sounding genuinely concerned. "I've been watching you work, and you do a great job. Here, take this." He gave her a banknote that was more than enough to cover a day's work. Jasmine looked up, surprised and confused by the unexpected gift. "Thank you, but you really don't have to," Jasmine said, surprised. Liam smiled and shook his head. "It's the least I can do. It's a tough world, and people should help each other when they can." As he left, Jasmine held the money tightly, feeling a mix of gratitude and disbelief. It wasn't just the money that meant a lot to her, but the kindness from someone who seemed to live a life of luxury. It reminded her that compassion still exists, even among the rich. Back at his fancy mansion, Liam's stepfather, Marcus, a wealthy and calculating man in his late 50s, was noticing Liam's recent acts of charity. Marcus, who was always thinking about their family's status, saw these acts as a threat. He thought kindness might be a weakness that could harm their reputation. One evening, Marcus called Liam to his study. The room was filled with expensive art and old furniture. Marcus sat back in his chair, looking serious. "Liam, I've heard about your recent charity work," Marcus said, sounding smooth but disapproving. "You might not realize, but this could hurt our family's image. We have a reputation to maintain." Liam, used to his stepfather's controlling ways, was surprised by how serious Marcus was. "I'm just trying to help people," he said firmly. "Isn't that a good thing?" Marcus's face grew stern. "Not if it harms our reputation. You need to understand how important this is." Liam was confused but didn't have time to ask more. Marcus continued, "I think you need to learn about responsibility and image. I've set up something to help you understand." The next day, Jasmine got an unexpected visit from Marcus. He arrived at her small apartment, looking out of place among the modest surroundings. With a careful smile, he made Jasmine an offer that seemed too good to be true. "Jasmine," he began, "I'm here to offer you a chance," Marcus said. "My stepson Liam wants to help people like you, to avoid any more problems. We've come up with a plan. If you agree to marry Liam, you'll have a life of comfort and wealth." Jasmine was shocked. "Marry him? But why? I don't even know him." Marcus's smile didn't change. "It's a way to secure your future and help your community. The money you'll get could really make a difference in your life and others. Jasmine was torn. The chance to improve her life and help her family was tempting, but marrying a stranger felt wrong. Still, the possibility of making a big impact with the money made her think. As days passed, Jasmine felt overwhelmed by her conflicting emotions. She didn't realize that Marcus's offer was part of a bigger plan to manipulate and control. The real purpose of Marcus's scheme was hidden, setting the stage for future conflicts and secrets. Meanwhile, Liam's life continued to be shaped by Marcus's influence. Liam didn't know the full extent of his stepfather's plans. As the wedding day got closer, tension built up. Jasmine's choice would soon reveal a web of betrayal and deceit that neither she nor Liam could have expected. With Sydney's skyline shining in the sunlight, Jasmine found herself at a difficult decision. Marcus's proposal left her confused. Marrying a wealthy man like Liam was tempting, but the way the offer was made felt wrong. Marcus seemed more interested in controlling her than in being kind. Jasmine spent the next few days feeling overwhelmed. Trying to make sense of the situation, Jasmine was torn between a comfortable life and the moral issues of the arrangement. One evening, while cleaning a fancy restaurant in Sydney, she saw Marcus talking privately with an older woman. Jasmine noticed the woman's brooch, which seemed oddly familiar. She tried to ignore it and focused on her work, but the brooch kept coming back to her mind. The next day, Jasmine went to a local market and overheard a conversation about a wealthy estate and a woman named Evelyn Howard. The talk included a sad story of loss and betrayal. The name Howard caught her attention, and she remembered the brooch from the restaurant. Curious, she decided to look into it. Jasmine found old newspaper articles about Evelyn Howard. They described Evelyn as a kind and generous woman who was well known in Sydney's high society. After her death, her wealth had gone to her husband, Marcus. Determined to find out more, Jasmine went to the local archives. There, she found more information about Evelyn Howard's life and her tragic death. What shocked Jasmine the most was learning about a missing infant daughter who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. Jasmine realized with horror that the missing child was her. As Jasmine put the pieces together, she discovered Marcus's cruel actions. He had married Evelyn, taken her wealth, and then abandoned Jasmine when Evelyn died. Marcus had deliberately erased Jasmine's existence to keep control of the family's money. This was a crushing blow, confirming her worst fears about Marcus and the true nature of his proposal. The wedding day came with a mix of excitement and fear. The fancy venue, filled with lavish decorations, was a stark contrast to Jasmine's modest background. Guests in elegant outfits buzzed with excitement, unaware of the hidden drama. Liam, not knowing the true reasons behind the marriage arrangement, was getting ready for the ceremony. Despite his doubts and the growing tension, he tried to stay positive, hoping that marrying Jasmine might lead to something good. He had come to appreciate Jasmine's strength and kindness and wished their marriage could bring about some positive change. Dressed in a beautiful wedding gown, Jasmine felt both nervous and determined as she walked down the aisle. She glanced at Marcus, whose smug look did nothing to calm her. As the ceremony began, Jasmine braced herself for the worst. She knew Marcus was planning to reveal her past to embarrass her and Liam, but she was ready to act. With newfound courage, Jasmine stepped forward and interrupted the ceremony. "Stop! I have something to say," she declared. The guests whispered in confusion as Jasmine took a deep breath. "When I was a child, Marcus abandoned me. My mother, Evelyn Howard, died years ago. Marcus took her money and left me in poverty." The room was stunned. Liam looked shocked, and Marcus's face went pale. The image Marcus had carefully built started to fall apart. Jasmine continued, her voice steady despite shaking hands. "Marcus tricked me into this marriage not out of kindness, but for his own gain. I am the rightful heir to Evelyn Howard's estate, not just a poor cleaner." The guests were stunned into silence, glancing between Jasmine and Marcus. Liam, now fully aware of Marcus's betrayal, felt a mix of anger and shock. He realized that his stepfather had set up the entire situation to satisfy his own greedy desires. Marcus's calm demeanor crumbled as he faced the truth. Jasmine's accusations and the guest's shock left him trapped. His deceit and manipulation were exposed for everyone to see. As the guests started to understand what had happened, Jasmine's strength and determination became clear. She went from being a pawn in Marcus's scheme to a symbol of truth and justice. What was supposed to be a display of Marcus's power turned into a reveal of his darkest secrets. The once fancy wedding hall was now filled with confusion and commotion. The elegant decorations seemed out of place against the drama unfolding. Guests whispered among themselves, their faces showing a mix of shock and curiosity. Liam stood frozen, trying to process the shocking news Jasmine had just shared. Marcus, who had once been confident in his power, now found himself in a crisis he couldn't control. As Jasmine's words echoed through the hall, Liam's shock turned into intense anger. He turned to Marcus, his voice quiet but full of rage. "Is it true, Marcus? Did you really abandon Jasmine and steal her mother's fortune?" Marcus, now trapped and desperate, tried to stay calm. "Liam, this is all a misunderstanding. Jasmine is trying to mess things up." Liam's anger flared. "I've seen enough. It's clear you've been deceitful from the beginning. The truth is out, and you need to explain yourself to everyone here." The guests whispered among themselves, their interest piqued. The festive mood was replaced with tension and anticipation. Jasmine stood firm, her heart racing but her determination strong. She had revealed Marcus's deceit, but the fight was far from over. Marcus's face showed panic as he tried to save his reputation. "This is a smear campaign. Jasmine is trying to deceive everyone." Before he could say more, the police arrived, called by worried guests who had seen Marcus's deceit. The officers, informed about what had happened, began to investigate. They questioned Marcus, Jasmine, and the stunned guests. With Liam by her side, Jasmine explained the truth about her past and Marcus's betrayal. She shared details about Marcus's schemes and her research into Evelyn Howard's history, which supported her claims. The police took notes and promised to look into everything carefully. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Marcus had not only manipulated the situation but had also been involved in fraud. Jasmine's evidence confirmed her identity as Evelyn Howard's daughter and showed that Marcus had falsely claimed her inheritance. The days after the wedding were chaotic. Marcus faced growing financial and legal problems. Meanwhile, Jasmine and Liam found themselves unexpectedly working together. Jasmine and Liam's shared experience and growing respect for each other turned their forced marriage into something genuine. Liam, feeling guilty for being part of Marcus's scheme, was deeply affected by Jasmine's struggles. He promised to help her seek justice. Jasmine's bravery and determination inspired many. She continued to fight for those who had been wronged and used her situation to highlight injustices. Her transformation from a struggling cleaner to a strong advocate for justice showed her courage. As the legal battles against Marcus heated up, Jasmine and Liam worked closely together. They spent long hours going through documents, meeting with lawyers, and preparing for court. Their teamwork showed their dedication to finding the truth and seeking justice. Even with the growing evidence against him, Marcus refused to give up. He kept trying to deceive and discredit Jasmine, but with increasing public support and solid legal evidence, it was becoming harder for him to maintain his false image. The turning point came when the court showed all the evidence of Marcus's crimes. It was clear he was guilty, and his attempts to hide his actions failed. The judge, impressed by Jasmine's courage and the solid proof of Marcus's wrongdoing, sentenced him to a long prison term and ordered him to return the stolen money. Jasmine and Liam's hard-fought victory was a testament to their strength and persistence. Going through this struggle had made their bond stronger. After the trial, Jasmine and Liam decided to use their experience for good. They started a foundation to help people in need, focusing on supporting and providing opportunities for those who are less fortunate. Their aim was to make a positive impact in the community and prevent others from facing similar injustices. In the courtroom, everyone was silent as the verdict was read. Marcus was sentenced to 15 years in prison for his fraud and ordered to repay the stolen money. His proud facade was shattered, and he had to face the consequences of his greed and deceit. He had underestimated Jasmine and Liam's resolve, and now he was paying the price. As Marcus was taken away in handcuffs, the media went wild with coverage. News channels all over Sydney reported on the fall of the wealthy businessman and the surprising events that led to his downfall. Jasmine and Liam found themselves in the public eye, becoming symbols of bravery and justice. Their story inspired many people. Jasmine, now recognized as the rightful owner of Evelyn Howard's estate, faced the challenge of adjusting to her new life. Going from a struggling cleaner to inheriting a large fortune was overwhelming, but she was determined to use her wealth for good. With Liam's help, she started working on the promises she had made. Liam, having seen Marcus's manipulation up close, felt a strong sense of duty. His initial act of kindness had sparked the events that led to Marcus's downfall, and he wanted to make sure their work had a lasting impact. Together with Jasmine, he set up a foundation in Sydney to support, educate, and help those in need. The foundation's goal was to assist the underprivileged and give a helping hand to those who had been forgotten by society. Jasmine and Liam put in a lot of hard work to set up programs that helped with various needs, like giving financial aid, education, and job training. They used their platform to push for social justice and draw attention to the struggles faced by underserved communities. Jasmine's story, once full of hardship and betrayal, had become a symbol of hope and change. Her bravery and determination turned her into an advocate for positive change, and her efforts were really making a difference in many people's lives. She found satisfaction in using her experiences to help others and make a real impact. Liam also discovered a new purpose. By working with the foundation, he was able to use his wealth and influence to support meaningful causes. The experience changed him from a wealthy young man who was disconnected from others' struggles into someone who truly cared about making a difference.
When my mother-in-law was asked if I would be preparing the New Year's meal, she responded with a dramatic wave of her hands and a burst of laughter. "Absolutely not. That's impossible. My daughter-in-law can't cook to save her life," she exclaimed, proudly calling me the hopeless housewife who couldn't even manage a New Year's feast. She declared herself the sole authority in the kitchen. Her laughter wasn't just annoying. It felt like an outright insult. After enduring her derision for so long, I knew it was time to stand up for myself. My name is Natalie, I'm 29, and I got married last year. As a full-time housewife, I take pleasure in cooking, and thankfully, my husband isn't too picky. Anything edible seems to satisfy him. He's a kind man, and we live in a beautifully renovated home with a dream kitchen, complete with a large island. It should have been the perfect setup, but there's always been one persistent issue: my mother-in-law. She prides herself on her culinary skills and views me as a complete disappointment in the kitchen. Worse still, she doesn't keep her opinions to herself. Just the other day, while I was outside doing laundry, I overheard her gossiping loudly with the neighbor's wife. My daughter-in-law can't even cook properly. It's dreadful. I wonder about her upbringing. My poor son is so unfortunate to be stuck with her, she lamented. Each word felt like a thorn piercing through me. It was bad enough to endure her critiques of my cooking, but to hear her belittle my family was completely unacceptable. I realized I couldn't let this continue. It was time to take a stand. I've always held my parents in high regard, cherishing the countless lessons they taught me. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law never bothered to understand or appreciate those values. Instead, she chose to belittle me at every opportunity. Today was just another chapter in her ongoing series of critiques, her biting remarks echoing throughout the neighborhood. She doesn't even know how to season food properly. If I don't cook, there's no flavor at all. Why did my son have to marry someone like her? The neighbors chimed in, adding fuel to the fire with their jabs, questioning why she hadn't taught me herself. I muttered under my breath, "Enough is enough." I wish they would all just stop. My hand gripped a glass so tightly that it cracked. That evening, when my husband Daniel came home and my mother-in-law was conveniently in the shower, I saw my chance to finally let it all out. "Can't you do something about your mother?" I pleaded with Daniel as I helped him out of his jacket. "She's going around the neighborhood every day, making me out to be some hopeless cook." I opened up about my mother-in-law's relentless behavior, feeling it was necessary. Daniel isn't particularly close to his mother and genuinely cares about me, so I expected his support, maybe even hoped he would defend me or, at the very least, acknowledge the strain her words were causing. But his reaction took me by surprise. "Well, Mom has always been very particular about cooking," he said, scratching his head, looking genuinely troubled. The word particular hung in the air, so light yet laden with accusation. I almost fired back with a comment about her overpowering seasoning but held back, staring at him in disbelief, wondering if he truly understood the impact of his mother's words. "Come on, she's a good cook, right?" he asked nonchalantly. I was taken aback. "Well, I don't know much about good or bad cooking," he continued, "but please just try to get along with Mom. That's what a wife is supposed to do, isn't it?" With that, he left the room, leaving me stunned. Was this some kind of joke? Thoughts swirled in my mind. A good cook, a wife's duty. What does that even mean? Frustration surged within me. As much as I hated to admit it, my mother-in-law's cooking was far from delightful. She had monopolized the kitchen for the past year, ostensibly to spare me the effort, but I had never truly enjoyed her meals. She firmly believed that piling on the spices equated to better flavor. Daniel, raised on those robust tastes, always finished his plate without a word of complaint, but for me, eating such heavily spiced food was a daily struggle. Not only was it unpleasant, but I feared it might ruin my palate and wasn't great for my health. Each mealtime had become a silent battle where I forced myself to finish my portion out of fear of the consequences of leaving any behind. Alone in the quiet of our bedroom, I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me. I let out a heavy sigh. The real shock wasn't that Daniel failed to criticize his mother's cooking style, it was that he didn't seem to take my feelings seriously. In moments like these, I found myself missing the familiar, comforting meals from my parents' home. As the year drew to a close, so did the anticipation for the New Year's celebrations. This would be my first New Year since marrying into this family traditionally marked by a large gathering and a feast prepared by my mother-in-law. However, instead of joy, I felt a sense of dread as I pondered how to navigate familial expectations and the overpowering flavors that had become a regular part of my life. When Daniel casually mentioned that it was customary for the family to gather and enjoy the feast prepared by his mother for New Year's, I couldn't help but silently question the tradition. Outwardly, I managed only a half-hearted "oh." It seemed the relatives who eagerly attended each year had grown to love her cooking, or perhaps they had simply become accustomed to it. Despite feeling a twinge of sympathy for them, I couldn't shake the slight dread creeping in. Even though my mother-in-law frequently criticized my supposedly bland culinary skills, my parents had instilled a strong confidence in my cooking abilities. I secretly longed to cook for everyone and maybe even introduce some subtler flavors to Daniel's palate. With newfound resolve, I decided it was time to discuss the New Year's feast with my mother-in-law. As she bustled around the kitchen, pulling out large plates and pots, I seized the moment. "I'd like to help with the New Year's feast," I ventured, hoping to contribute to the upcoming celebration. But as she turned to face me, her expression was one of immediate dismissal. "Natalie, you can't even cook properly. How can you prepare food for the New Year's celebration? We'll have not just our family but all the relatives over. You know that, right?" she retorted. "But I'm part of this family now. It's my duty as a wife to contribute," I insisted, determination rising within me. I argued, my voice laced with desperation, but she simply shook her head. "Do you want to create an awkward atmosphere for the New Year? Everyone comes expecting my cooking. We can't disappoint them. Please, if you understand, don't interfere." Frustration bubbled within me as I watched her dismiss my offer, turning back to her preparations. When New Year's Day arrived, the house quickly filled with about 20 relatives, more than I had anticipated, many of whom I hadn't seen since the wedding. As each guest arrived, I greeted them warmly, ushering them into the spacious dining room that had once overwhelmed me when I first moved in. The unusually large room buzzed with energy, perfectly suited for such gatherings. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was already deep in conversation with the arriving relatives, taking center stage in the kitchen and being the heart of the celebration. During the festive preparations, a relative curiously asked, "By the way, is Natalie preparing the feast this year?" My mother-in-law waved her hands dismissively and laughed. "That's impossible. My daughter-in-law can't cook at all. She's a hopeless housewife who can't even manage a New Year's feast. I handle all the cooking around here," she declared. Her laughter sounded harsh and unwelcoming. It was not a light-hearted joke, but a pointed insult directed at me. At that moment, I reached my breaking point. "Mother-in-law, please let me prepare the New Year's feast this time. If it doesn't turn out well, you can always make a palate-cleansing dish," I suggested, breaking the tense silence that ensued. After a brief pause, the room began to buzz with whispers from the relatives. "Well, I certainly don't want a disappointing meal, but they say practice makes perfect, right?" my mother-in-law said, her tone conceited yet reluctantly acknowledging the shifting tide of opinion among the relatives in favor of giving me a chance. "All right, fine. If it doesn't work out, Freda can step in," she added. "Very well then, Nat, you can take the reins this year," she stated, her words tinged with reluctance. "But remember, I can always step in, ladies and gentlemen, so indulge this hopeless housewife's whims for once," she announced, her tone dripping with patronization. But with my heart swelling with pride and determination, I was ready to showcase my cooking skills to everyone. This was my chance to change their perceptions. I poured my heart into preparing the meal, and as I presented the beautifully arranged feast on a large platter, exclamations of admiration filled the room. "Wow, the meal turned out perfectly. It looks delicious. Well done, Natalie. This isn't something just anyone could pull off," they praised enthusiastically. Amidst their compliments, my mother-in-law, who had just returned from shopping for her so-called palate-cleansing dish, glanced at my spread. "It looks all right, I suppose, but it's probably bland," she remarked, emphasizing the word probably and clearly reluctant to acknowledge my success. Ignoring her comments, I focused on distributing paper plates and forks to the relatives, encouraging them to enjoy the meal. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law hurried back into the kitchen to prepare what she deemed necessary, keeping a watchful eye on us as if expecting to intervene at any moment. The relatives tentatively began sampling the dishes I had prepared. As I watched the guests sample the dishes, a murmur of approval began to build. My mother-in-law, not one to miss an opportunity, chuckled with apparent satisfaction and announced loudly, "See? I told you this is why she's the incompetent daughter-in-law." She turned to the crowd, adding, "You don't need to force yourselves. I'll prepare the palate-cleansing dish right away." Tone dripped with triumph, as if she expected to salvage what she assumed would be a culinary disaster. However, her satisfaction was quickly overshadowed by the sounds of genuine delight coming from the dining room. "This is the first time I've tasted New Year's food this delicious. It's like something from a fancy hotel. Natalie, where did you learn to cook like this?" exclaimed one of the relatives, their praise electrifying the atmosphere. Amidst the lively crowd, my mother-in-law stood momentarily stunned into silence by the unexpected approval. With everyone's attention now on me and none on her, I felt a surge of confidence. It was the perfect moment to reveal my background. "I grew up in a family that is deeply passionate about food," I began, my voice steady and clear. "My family owns a renowned French restaurant celebrated for its authentic cuisine and even recognized in the Michelin Guide. My father is the 5th generation overseeing culinary operations, and my mother, from a long lineage of chefs, supports him wholeheartedly. From a young age, I absorbed the art of cooking by observing my parents, honing my skills as they expertly crafted every dish. By the time when I was in upper elementary school, I earnestly learned the art of cooking from my parents. Although my brother is poised to inherit the restaurant, the culinary knowledge they passed down remains a deep source of pride for me." This revelation shifted the atmosphere in the room, further cementing my newfound respect among the relatives and leaving my mother-in-law to contemplate the unexpected turn of events. As the room buzzed with impressed voices, I felt a profound connection to my heritage, finally proud to share my true culinary roots. That's why I found it impossible to tolerate my mother-in-law's dismissive remarks and actions that undermined my skills. To her, dismissing my cooking was akin to denying my parents' legacy and the restaurant that had been a cornerstone of our family for generations. I had mentioned this before I got married, but it seemed to have fallen on deaf ears. My mother-in-law often treated me condescendingly, viewing me as just the daughter of a quaint countryside restaurant. Daniel, largely indifferent to culinary nuances, probably couldn't differentiate between a family-run establishment and authentic French cuisine. I sometimes questioned why I had married into this family, a thought I muttered under my breath as I turned to the sound of someone calling my name, meeting the gaze of several pairs of expectant eyes. We have seconds. I want more. Despite the generous portions I had prepared, everything had been completely devoured. A wave of happiness washed over me, and I felt tears welling up. Receiving praise for my cooking should have felt routine, something I had known before marrying, yet over the past year, I seem to have forgotten that sensation entirely. Yes, I'll prepare more right away, I declared, renewed determination surging through me as I hurried out of the room. As I passed by my motionless mother-in-law, I noted that she had, after all, brought some ingredients, despite her earlier criticisms. "Mother-in-law, I'll use these ingredients," I announced, but she offered no reply. The groceries sat untouched in the kitchen as I reached into the supermarket bag to inspect its contents. Just then, 4 women entered the kitchen. Could you teach us how to cook too?" one of them asked, their faces eager with anticipation. I glanced up to see them lined up before me, their ages varying from my own to that of my mother-in-law's. This unexpected request bolstered my confidence. Here was a chance not just to share my heritage but also to foster a bond over our mutual love of cooking, transcending generational and family boundaries. It was a moment of validation, a chance to demonstrate the depth of my skills and the rich culinary legacy I carried. As I looked into their eyes, each gleamed with the same eager curiosity. "The food was amazing. We'd love to learn from you," they enthused. Hearing those words ignited something within me. I had never considered teaching cooking before, but witnessing their admiration awakened a newfound desire to share my knowledge. With a smile, I gladly agreed to teach them, and the room erupted with excitement. The group began animatedly discussing how they would impress their husbands by honing their cooking skills. Thus began an impromptu cooking class. My mother-in-law watched us from a distance, her expression unreadable as she silently tidied up. As we concluded the class and the dishes were served, they were met with enthusiastic praise. I must admit, Grace's cooking can be a bit too salty for my taste, but Natalie's dishes are delicate and refined, truly professional French cuisine. Jennifer, one of the participants, beamed with joy at the recognition. Feeling a mix of pride and unease, I offered a faint smile to my mother-in-law, but she remained focused on cleaning, undisturbed by the ongoing praises. Just as I pondered how to ease the tension, Daniel stepped in with a decisive statement. "I actually prefer Natalie's cooking. Mom's strong flavors have always made me concerned about salt and health. Going forward, Natalie should handle the cooking regularly." His words seemed to take my mother-in-law completely by surprise, and before long, she quietly withdrew to her room. The news of my culinary abilities spread quickly among my relatives, marking a significant shift in how they viewed me and my place in the family. This unexpected turn of events not only bolstered my confidence but also subtly shifted the household dynamics in ways I hadn't anticipated. As word of my culinary talent spread, I soon found myself receiving requests to teach cooking classes. Initially hesitant, I remembered the joy from the impromptu New Year's cooking session and decided to embrace the opportunity. People genuinely valued my skills, and through word of mouth, my reputation as a skilled chef of authentic French cuisine grew rapidly. Before I knew it, I was featured in media outlets and celebrated as a housewife renowned for her cooking. Requests for my classes began pouring in from all over the country. Life, I learned, is wonderfully unpredictable. This unexpected journey even led to a feature about me in a prominent cooking magazine. In the article, I spoke about my culinary heritage and my father's influence on my skills. As for my mother-in-law, who had once spread less than flattering rumors about my cooking abilities, she ceased commenting on culinary matters altogether after the shift in family and public opinion. Over time, she gradually stopped cooking entirely, leaving me with full responsibility for meals in our home. Despite the increased busyness, we now live together peacefully, a significant change from our earlier days.
After the somber funeral for my father, a prominent shareholder, my brother-in-law caught us off guard by raising the delicate topic of inheritance. The focus shifted to stocks and a substantial $5 million bequest, confidently asserting that my wife, the eldest daughter, and my sister was set to inherit this windfall. The revelation initially filled her with joy at the prospect of a significant inheritance. However, their excitement was short-lived when the family lawyer delivered the disheartening news that my brother-in-law had no legitimate claim to the inheritance. I, Greg Johnson, a 42-year-old office worker, reflected on my father's vibrant life, despite his age of 78. He remained full of vitality, actively engaged in his work. My older sister, a perpetual source of trouble, led a carefree life, causing continuous worry for our parents. In her middle age, she introduced Aaron Corner, a man she intended to marry. Despite his youth and handsomeness, I couldn't warm up to him due to his demeanor. My sister demanded that our father finance her wedding, swiftly depleting the funds and unapologetically seeking more. A year after her marriage, tragedy struck. Our father collapsed while playing golf and passed away a few days later. Overwhelmed by grief, I found myself struggling with the funeral preparations, with no assistance from my sister. After the funeral, a lawyer visited our home to discuss the inheritance outlined in my father's will. While my mother and I were already aware of its contents, my sister and brother-in-law were oblivious until then. They shockingly claimed that the stocks and the $5 million inheritance should go to my wife. Stunned and speechless, my mother and I were taken aback. The lawyer corrected them, revealing that my brother-in-law had no right to inherit. Surprised and disappointed, my sister and her husband expressed disbelief and shock. The lawyer dropped another bombshell. My sister and I did not share the same father. This revelation left my sister furious, demanding an explanation from our mother, who wore an indescribable expression. The long-held family secret had finally come to light, leaving my sister shaken and seeking answers. "I'm sorry," our mother managed to say amidst the shaking emotions. "You are the child of my previous husband." Since childhood, my sister had teased me, claiming that Dad loved her more. Now faced with the truth, she seemed unable to accept it. However, she quickly shifted her stance, suggesting that if she was adopted, she would still have inheritance rights. Aaron chimed in, agreeing with her, yet our mother firmly denied any adoption, causing disbelief. "I'm the eldest daughter, and even Dad said so," my sister angrily declared, glaring at me in response. I felt my anger intensifying as I countered my sister's insatiable desire for more, despite the considerable amount of money our dad had already given her. My brother-in-law chimed in, supporting her claim and stating that it's natural to spend money on one's daughter. However, the lawyer intervened, drawing attention to the questionable spending, including debt repayment, and suggested reviewing the will. My sister panicked, claiming ignorance about any will. It turned out that our father had wanted to discuss and decide the contents with the family, but she had skipped it for frivolous reasons. When the lawyer proposed reviewing the will, my sister and her husband reluctantly agreed. The will clearly stated the transfer of property to my mother and me, explaining why my sister was not adopted. Her mistreatment of me and reckless spending had disappointed our father, realizing she had no right to the inheritance. My sister was visibly shocked, and her brother-in-law, who had initially supported her, suddenly changed his tune, accusing her of lying and abruptly leaving the room. In her anger, my sister blamed our mother for not asking to have her adopted, claiming it was unfair that only Mom received the inheritance. Frustrated, she cried and screamed, expressing her disappointment. Despite my sister's outrageous behavior, the lawyer remained calm, explaining that as the biological son, I had the right to receive it all. Before things escalated further, he warned that the police might need to be involved if the situation continued. My sister appeared startled by the mention of the police, given her history of repeated theft. As my mother spoke tearfully to her, she clicked her tongue and left the room. Half a year passed, and the inheritance proceedings were completed without issue. Despite some grumbling from my sister and brother-in-law, they couldn't stand against the lawyer's efficiency. My mother gave my sister a small amount of money, but I had no intention of interfering. The frustrating part for our family was that the two had disappeared. Their blatant greed was so evident that even our relatives were lost for words. One day, my wife suggested that my mother, daughter, and I go out to eat. Since my father's passing, our mother had been down, but she showed smiles when with her granddaughter. I suggested to my mother, "Why don't you live with us?" But you know, Rook still comes home occasionally. Sis only comes around to beg for money, doesn't she? How long does she plan to keep this up? The reason my mom defends my sister is that she is her blood-related child, and there might be concern that if we visit our family home, my sister might cause trouble again. Understanding that, I told her to take her time thinking about it and then drove my mom to our family home. Upon arrival, we encountered something unexpected. The lights were on in our supposedly empty home. It wasn't the time for the helper to come, so we were puzzled. I parked the car, suggesting, "Let's go up and have some coffee with Mother." We got out of the car and headed to the entrance, but the moment we approached the door, a car came rushing in. "Mom, watch out." Hearing my daughter ahead of me, I shielded my wife with my body. The car just grazed me, and I managed to dodge it, but I collided with a nearby flower bed, injuring myself badly. The car stopped after hitting the garage door. "Are you okay, Dad?" My wife and daughter rushed over, supporting me. Mother was trembling in shock at the sudden event. Understandably, from that moment on, a day of turmoil began. I was taken to the hospital by ambulance and had to be hospitalized briefly. Later, I heard that Aaron Warner, my brother-in-law, was driving the car. According to the police, he explained that he mistook the accelerator for the brake. However, I had my doubts about that story. Amidst all of this, my sister and mother visited me in the hospital. Mother left briefly to arrange flowers, and during that time, my sister coldly looked at me and said, "You're only tough and bodied, huh?" With a slightly disappointed tone, I couldn't help but give her a smile. If I had died in the accident, Mom would inherit everything, right? "Messed up your plan," I said a bit sarcastically, and my sister looked uneasy. "You planned this, didn't you?" When I asked, my sister looked away, and I added, "But I won't be accepting Mom's share, so it won't work out for you." My sister looked surprised at this. She probably thought I would naturally accept it. I have a wife and kids, so I passed the inheritance to them. It's not strange for the head of the family to think that way. Even so, I've made a will early, like Dad did. My sister was taken aback at this. "What? So that means—" "Yeah, unfortunately, my share of the inheritance won't go to Mom." My sister stared at me, then began to shake with anger. "There's $5 million, right? You could at least share a bit." When I immediately refused, my sister furiously grabbed my collar. "I'm your sister. We should split it." Whether it was the amount of the inheritance that drove her mad, she continued to scream in a very aggressive voice. I felt pity for my sister. It's that greedy attitude that disappointed Dad. Don't you get it? My sister's face turned even redder, and she grabbed my neck. "Bro, stop it." Mother, who had just returned, scolded her loudly. Then the nurses, called by the nurses' call button, arrived and escorted my sister out of the room. Mother seemed to want to protect my sister, but my sister had lashed out at her too. As she left, she asked, "Why did she turn out like this?" Hearing Mother say this sadly, I felt a pain in my heart. Later, Mother's health deteriorated, and she fell off, gradually weakening. My wife and I started visiting the family home more frequently to support her, but this seemed to upset my sister. Probably she encountered my wife when coming to ask for money or heard about it from Mother. One day, my sister called my cell phone. "From now on, we will take care of Mom. You guys don't need to come. Watch this." All of a sudden, however, my sister wasn't listening and said, "We've already decided," before hanging up. My wife told me she had been turned away by my sister. Too concerned about how my sister, who had no experience in household chores or living, would manage, I quickly contacted Mother. To my surprise, I found out that my brother-in-law had experience in caregiving. Mother was still independent, not yet in a worrying state. This reassured me. However, within just a month, Mother was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. It was said to be due to a medication dosage error. When we rushed to the hospital, Mother was shockingly weak. The doctors also seemed puzzled by her condition. I couldn't recall such a mistake ever happening before. Leaving my wife to care for Mother, I went to our family home, which was in a terrible state. Despite my mother's love for cooking, the usually well-stocked fridge was shockingly empty. Even the helper had been swiftly dismissed. Feeling ashamed of trusting my sister even a little, anger surged within me. Checking the safe where valuables were kept, I discovered a large amount of money missing from Mother's passbook. The passbook with the inheritance was secure in a bank locker, but there was hardly any money left for living expenses. Returning to my mother, I explained the situation and revealed my sister's betrayal. Brooke did such a thing. Mother seemed unaware of the passbook issue and showed a shocked expression. When asked about the medication error, she explained that my brother-in-law had prepared it and looked troubled. "Mom, I don't think you should let them into that house. They claimed they would take care of you, but the state of that house was the worst. And you've gotten so frail. Haven't they been feeding you properly?" Speaking with concern, I hung her head. "Mom, let's live together. I'll build a new house, and we can live there together." Moved by my suggestion, Mother shed tears. However, her condition continued to worsen. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they, along with my sister, seemed to weigh heavily on her. Ultimately, Mother passed away without recovering. When I went to the family home for the funeral, all the valuable items had disappeared. It seemed that my sister and brother-in-law, in need of money, had taken them. Standing in the desolate place, I was overcome with anger. I had to find a way to make my sister take responsibility for Mother's sake and as atonement for what she had done. I resolved to do something. The day after Mother's funeral, my sister and I met at the lawyer's office to discuss the inheritance. "Condolences, but as her daughter, I'm entitled to Mother's inheritance," my sister said with a sense of superiority that made me laugh involuntarily. She seemed to be under some misconception. "Let's open the will then." As the lawyer revealed the contents of the will, my sister turned pale. "You're joking. Why, bro? You are not entitled to any of the inheritance. This is in accordance with Dad's wishes." My brother-in-law started to get angry, but the lawyer had nothing else to say except repeat the same thing. "This must be a mistake. Bro is her child, isn't she?" My brother-in-law suddenly became furious, throwing things off the table. "Are you trying to trick us? We won't let you get away with this. Give us the inheritance now." "Aaron, you planned to kill Mother, didn't you?" When I asked, my brother-in-law glared at me unpleasantly. "Oh, I wouldn't do such a thing." "Then why did the medication error occur?" My brother-in-law appeared annoyed. "I don't know anything about that. It's impossible that I can inherit. You must have done something." My sister was getting more agitated. "Now I'm even behind on my condo payments." I was shocked. She hadn't rushed to Mother's side after hearing of her death because she was busy with such matters, hoping for the inheritance. "Really, there's nothing left." My sister pressed the lawyer. "That seems to be the case. Let me explain in detail." The lawyer explained the details of the inheritance. Ultimately, after deducting what my sister had withdrawn and sold, there was hardly anything left for her to inherit. My sister held her head in dismay. I had discussed this in advance with the lawyer. I found satisfaction with the outcome. "Stop joking. There can't be so little." My mother and I hadn't told my sister, but most of Mother's property had already been distributed to my children, her grandchildren. Therefore, there was already little left to inherit. However, my sister kept murmuring her dissatisfaction. I felt nothing but resentment towards my sister, who had lived off the money given by father and now Mother, thinking she could rest easy knowing I would take care of her. "But you just took her money. You are a true disgrace to our parents." I raised my voice in frustration. "Caring for someone costs money, you know. Don't you understand? Then show me the receipts for what you spent on mom's care. I'll cover any necessary expenses. As I extended my hand, my sister turned pale and was at a loss for words. I threw those away. That's not good. Without receipts, it can't be proven as evidence. Hearing the lawyer's words, my sister struggled to find a response. During this, my brother-in-law tried to calm me down. Greg, your sister is in a tough spot. Maybe you could help her out a bit as family. I cannot. My immediate response left my brother-in-law speechless. I've been hurt by my sister for a long time. Frankly, I feel like it's karma, but you're the only siblings. Maybe just a little. He tried to say more, but I refused. I was filled with anger, and so was my brother-in-law, apparently. Dan, if that accident had worked out, Rook would have had the entire inheritance. What accident? Before I could ask, my brother-in-law started talking on his own. Because of this brother, things didn't go as planned. I was supposed to get a new car, but now there's barely enough money left even for repairs. My sister tried to stop him, but it was too late. That's a pretty serious statement. You could be accused of fraud. The lawyer held a recorder, smirking at my sister and brother-in-law. What the heck? Isn't that against the rules to do that? You agreed to our conversation being recorded at the beginning, didn't you? Called out by his own words, my brother-in-law's face turned pale. To him, I had one thing to say. Aaron, I will be pressing charges about that accident. Don't joke. Where's the evidence? The evidence has just been provided by you. My sister, crying, began to hit my brother-in-law. You idiot! It's all your fault. Why did you say that? Later, my brother-in-law faced legal consequences for his actions. Additionally, unresolved suspicions about his past emerged, requiring police involvement. For some time, my sister, as an accomplice, was said to face lesser charges. However, struggling with her condo payments, she was turned away by relatives when she asked for money. In contrast, I chose to work earnestly and not rely on inheritance. Now, receiving stock dividends has become a small pleasure in my life. In the aftermath of the legal proceedings, the rift between my sister and me widened. The family bonds that were already strained became nearly non-existent. Despite her attempts to seek support from relatives, my sister faced a cold shoulder and her financial struggles continued. Meanwhile, I focused on building a stable and fulfilling life for my own family, working diligently. I found solace in providing for my wife and children without relying on the tumultuous inheritance battles that had plagued us. The stock dividends became not just a financial benefit, but a symbol of my commitment to a more secure and principled life. Over time, my sister's situation didn't improve. The consequences of her actions weighed heavily on her, both financially and emotionally. It became a stark reminder of the importance of responsible choices and the lasting impact they can have on one's life. As the years passed, I held no ill will towards my sister, recognizing that everyone faces their own battles and makes their own choices. Still, the events that unfolded served as a powerful lesson about the significance of integrity, responsibility, and the enduring consequences of one's actions. In the midst of the turmoil, I found strength in forging ahead with resilience, determined to create a future that wasn't tainted by past misfortunes. The dividends, once a mere financial gain, evolved into a testament to the enduring power of personal growth and the ability to rise above adversity. Life moved forward, and I embraced the opportunities to thrive, leaving behind the shadows of familial discord. The lessons learned from this chapter of my life became an integral part of shaping my values and decisions, ensuring a legacy built on principles rather than the pursuit of material gain. In the end, it was not the inheritance that defined my journey, but the choices made along the way. Choices that led to a life grounded in authenticity, resilience, and a commitment to building a better future for those I cared about the most.